That's very, very true. All right. So today, I have our Twitch plan laid out. Today we're going to be talking about sanctions in the context of Cuba. And because it's Weapons Wednesday, we're going to flub it a little bit, and we're going to talk about sanctions as a weapon. So I only have one video to show you guys today, and then after that, we're going to look at a lot of reading and data together. We're going to nerd out. Is it true that you can't go to Cuba for tourism, but for support for the Cuban people? You heard that once on a travel vlog. I'm not sure. I went on a support for the Cuban people visa, though. So that's how I went, and it was very specific how we had to do things. Like, you can't give any money to, like, state-owned enterprise of any kind. Like, we stayed in a nonprofit. They cooked all of our meals for us there, so we wouldn't accidentally violate the terms of our visa going out and buying things. It was very, very specific how it worked. It is kind of... Sanctions are a weapon. I'd say maybe it's the most deadly weapon of them all. What about that, chat? Not a tangible... Okay, we're not doing a tangible weapon. See, next week, we will resume with the Bang Bang Exploders. We will do a lot more talk about Bang Bang Exploders next week. It's the concept. It's a conceptual weapon. Why do they let us go in to support Cuba but not North Korea? So this is something interesting that has to do with the sanctions. So the reason why tourism is restricted in both places does have to do with embargoes, the blockade, right? DJ Fellow says there's a good podcast series called Sanctions as War by Guerrilla History. Very, very cool. Thank you for the recommendation. And Kubashi is correct that sanctions kill around 500,000 people every single year. So the reason why, how these embargo sanctions, the blockade, as we think of it, the economic regulations that strangle certain countries, namely Cuba and the DPRK, the reason why they're different in how they manifest is that Cuba just has a U.S. blockade imposed upon it. And the DPRK has a UN blockade imposed upon it. And because of that, they're going to manifest a little bit differently. And we'll get into the details of the U.S. blockade. The U.S. blockade against Cuba ends up in many ways being a global blockade. But it's not formally a global blockade on paper. But the United States makes it very, very challenging for anybody else to do business with Cuba. Also, DPRK does have nukes. Girls, the blockades. Plural. Plural. Yes. So we're going to start off today with a video about the blockade. And you guys have heard over the past few days people talk about the reality of how the blockade affects people in Cuba. And we've talked about this a lot, but just to reiterate, you have basically conservatives telling you that Cuba's has collapsed, it's the brink of collapse, because they want to tell you that socialism is a failure. You have liberals telling you that Cuba's is collapsing on the brink of collapse because they want to blame everything on Donald Trump, and they want to say Donald Trump killed Cuba. Neither of these is true. Cuba has not collapsed. It is not on the brink of collapse. However, Cuba, the lives of people on the island are made way more difficult than they need to be because of the blockade. The blockade's intention is genocidal. They do want to kill these people. However, because of socialism, Cuba has managed to resist quite well against all odds. And the same thing with the DPRK as well. So the goal of the sanctions of the blockade is to harm these people, to strangle them, to sweat them out, right? To make them succumb to U.S.-backed regime change where they are because they can't take it anymore. But they are resisting, and they are doing pretty well resisting. So the correct framework we use to talk about the blockade against these people is not, oh my God, these poor people, they're dying. The blockade is not killing them. And you will see a lot of sensational clickbait stories implying otherwise. That's not the case as of yet anyway. They have resisted. However, the blockade does make their lives very, very, very difficult in ways it just doesn't need to. And our intention with the blockade is to kill them. So those are just the correct framing to have in your mind there. Microplastic says Cuba has fallen. They're dancing in the streets during blackouts. I mean, yes, and this is the thing. They have not fallen, and they have dealt with this a lot in their lifetime. Yes. So let me take a look at this video I have for the blockade. It's a 5-minute long video. And there's our King Adelso, our interpreter. And this is in just a neighborhood where we were just talking to some random people in the neighborhood.
Como parte también de las propias decisiones del gobierno revolucionario, estaremos visitando una MIPYME, es decir, una...
This is a micro and medium-sized enterprise that we're going to be visiting as well.
donde tiene un encadenamiento que los productos también que comercializa le presta servicio a otras entidades, pero también le presta servicio a los vulnerables y a los más necesitados aquí de la
They
comunidad.
sell the products they have there, but at the same time, they are also committed to render service to vulnerable people in the community.
Así estaremos visitando la farmacia, un comedor del SAF.
We are
todo
going
lo
to
verán.
visit the pharmacy, a dining room for people in the community.
Bueno, nosotros aprovechar su presencia aquí, que es muy importante para todos nosotros.
We want to take sorry, I'm giving you my back. We want to take advantage of your presence because it's very important for us.
Y denunciar una vez más el bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero muy feroz a nuestra revolución.
To denounce once more that ferocious financial and economic blockade against our nation.
Hoy mismo todas las carencias que estamos presentando el pueblo cubano, como en el sistema de la electricidad, la alimentación y la higiene comunal, es producto a ese bloqueo.
Today we can see that all the shortages we're having, lack of electricity, we cannot collect garbage from the streets. All those things are the product of that blockade.
Como por ejemplo nuestro primer secretario y presidente de la República, compañero Miguel Mario Díaz-Canel.
And another thing I just want to say, these are people who have a very functioning society. So I think there's this idea that Cubans are so poor they live like feral animals or something. So when we talk about the horrible things that are happening to them because of the blockade, right? I think people expect that they're like dying. But it's things that if you were to think about them, they would severely affect you and make you feel not great. You know, it's more things like that. Like, they can't run garbage collection as frequently, so sometimes garbage piles up on the streets. It's not that they're not running garbage collection, but they're running it less frequently, so they're noticing garbage is piling up on the streets, right? And these are dignified people who live in a clean, civilized society, right? Civilized, more civilized than us, definitely. So they would like to not have their trash overflow in their streets, and they should be entitled to that, right? They should be entitled to that in their lives. But so I think that the way most Westerners conceptualize of Cubans also affects what they think is a crisis or a catastrophe for them. I think the average Westerner is probably like, they're used to living in filth, so that wouldn't be a crisis for them. So the babies must be dying on the ventilators. And I think that kind of feeds the disinformation from well-intentioned liberals about what's going on in Cuba. But it's like, well, no, it's things that, like, think about your town. Think about your garbage man starts skipping weeks. Think about your garbage guy comes every other week instead of every week. Your trash cans are getting full. There's no room for things. It's more things like that. So I think that's kind of important to remember.
Denunciaba más de 3 meses que a Cuba no entra un barril de petróleo. Eso también encarece y todas las necesidades y vicisitudes que hoy estamos presentando.
Our President Miguel Manuel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez just denounced that in more than 3 months now, not a single barrel of oil has been able to enter Cuba in 3 months. And all that is putting more hardship in the problems we are having today in the community.
Pero desde aquí estamos demostrando que somos un pueblo fuerte.
But
Y
from
nuestra
here-
principal fortaleza es la unidad entre todos los factores y el pueblo unido para seguir echando para adelante.
But today we are proving that we are a strong people, and our strength is based on our unity of all the factors within communities.
Nuestra propia organización, los Comités de Defensa de la Revolución, fundada y creada por el más grande de todos los cubanos, nuestro comandante en jefe Fidel Castro Ruz.
Our own organization, the CDR, that was founded by the greatest of biggest of all Cubans, Fidel Castro Ruz.
Tenemos nuestra misión principal, que es la vigilancia popular revolucionaria.
Our main mission is the popular revolutionary taking care of the revolution.
Y nos estamos cogiendo muy en serio, además nos estamos vinculando mucho a los procesos sociales, es decir, esa familia disfuncional, esos niños con problemas hoy en la escuela, en su vivienda, esas cosas nos están ocupando mucho tiempo para resolverlas y
But
transformarlas.
we are also being involved in solving all the issues we are having at social level in our communities, because things have become very difficult for our families and communities.
De conjunto con la Unión de Jóvenes Comunistas estamos en un proceso desde los barrios con los jóvenes que son adictos al consumo de droga.
Working together with the Young Communist League, we are trying to cope with young people that today are drug users.
Donde tenemos un centro en la provincia donde esos muchachos que están en el consumo van y tienen todo un tratamiento psicológico, psiquiatra, también de atención social, y después los reincorporamos al trabajo social.
Young people that we detect that are under those addictions, we have a center at provincial level. We take them there. They get rehabilitation, they get psychological treatment, psychiatric treatment, and once they get well, they are reinserted in their communities.
Por poner una cifra, en el año 2025 por ese centro pasaron más de 4,000 jóvenes de toda la provincia.
Just to give you a figure, in the year 2025, more than 4,000 young people attended that center to be rehabilitated in the province of Havana. 4,000 in a year.
Creo que es un trabajo muy importante porque estamos trabajando, valga la redundancia, con la juventud, desde ese seno de la familia disfuncional, desde ese seno con la familia con problemáticas sociales.
I do believe this is an important work. We are working with young people that are in dysfunctional families, so it's important that we intervene on this to help them out.
Bueno, yo no lo atraso un poco más, lo exhorto entonces y
No
pasaremos
more delay, let's go and see the bakery.
Okay, hi, sorry. I'm back. I'm sorry, I'm here. How long was it? It wasn't that long, right? Oh, we saw the bakery, actually. If you looked on Friday's episode, we saw the bakery. So, this is just kind of an intro, and they're just kind of talking about it, like, to understand, like, these people are now tasked with additional work. They're already tasked with trying to make sure their society runs, and now and they've gotten used to some elements of the blockade. They're like, okay, I guess we'll roll with this punch. I guess we'll roll with this punch. I guess we'll roll with this punch. And they have really managed to make something amazing despite it. But it's like, we just keep adding shit to their plate that makes it hard for them to survive, let alone thrive. And when we say survive, what we mean is things like, well, now you just have more work on your plate, right? Now it's like, well, you were doing all this stuff for your community. You were taking care of people who are struggling with addiction. You were making sure everybody got their free bread. And now you got to deal with extra trash on your streets too. It's just like, oh my, are you fucking kidding? And it's just more. So that's the kind of stuff that they're really dealing with. That makes it very, very hard. And it is just cruel. It's just senseless. Like, why put these people through this extra work? Why make them jump through hoops like this? It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's what's going on there when we talk about how the blockade is manifesting. And what you are going to see when we get into details about the blockade is that the blockade does not accomplish what the United States government wants it to. But it does kill people. It does kill people. And it is a form of murder, but not the way you might think. So that's really what the point of this kind of stream is, to really get an accurate, comprehensive understanding of a blockade and how it works. Now, a blockade is not a legal term. Somebody was asking earlier, what's the difference between like a blockade, an embargo, and a sanction? So I know they roll backwards. I need to fix it. I didn't realize when I made them. I need to flip it. You know, I'll add it to the to-do list today. Flip tanky mode. It's on the list. So it rolls right. I'll forget otherwise. I'm going to fix it. I know, they're rolling backwards. And I said, just like Tiananmen Square. They're getting out of there. Just like Tank Man in Tiananmen Square. They're leaving the scene of the crime. They're like, oh, bye. They're retreating. Okay, so just the proper orientation for this, I really want us to like understand it. It's more complicated than especially than a lot of liberals are painting it out to be, right? Yeah, I'm super Cuba-pilled. I'm so Cuba-pilled. I love Cuba. Every time I experience something moderately new with communism, though, I get super whatever that thing is pilled. Like, now I'm Tito-pilled. All right, after reading Tito, talk about the trots, I'm Tito-pilled. I'm so Tito-pilled. I'm Cuba-pilled. I'm everything-pilled, babe. I'm doing it. Buy tanks go both ways. So, what we're going to look at now is going to be a lot of data just about sanctions, embargoes, and blockades. So, the blockade is a colloquialism. It's not an actual proper term. That is something people used to explain a series of different sanctions or embargoes that make it hard for them to exist financially and to trade with the rest of the world. So a sanction might be a set of rules imposed on, theoretically, usually it's just certain people who are high up in a blockade is a colloquialism. It's like a phrase, it's a turn of phrase. It's not a legal designation. So a sanction very often might just apply to somebody in positions of power in your country, but in practicality, in reality, they end up expanding far beyond that, extending beyond that, and being harmful in different ways. An embargo might mean like you can't trade this thing, you can't get this thing in there. So it's a blockade would be a combination of a series of different sanctions and embargoes that amount to basically slowing down trade, your country's trade ability, so much that it virtually is non-existent. And that doesn't mean they can't trade anything, but it is so significant that it is affecting their ability to function and actually have their economy work. So that's what we mean by a blockade. So that doesn't mean nothing gets in, but it means it's so weird and hard that it is significantly affecting all sectors of their society. So that would be the difference between those two things. So to start with, we're going to pull up this text about sanctions. This is Helen Yaffe. Hold on. Screen share. And this is U.S. sanctions Cuba to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government. So this is chapter 8 of a text on this. And I'll get you guys, I'll get you guys a tiny URL, actually. One second. Okay, there's it. Oh, happy birthday, Avril Cringe. Wow, very, very exciting. So Helen Yaffe, for those of you who don't know, is this baddie, and she comes from University of Glasgow, which is where our King Alan MacLeod comes from as well. So she is kind of an expert on Cuba in the blockade. Whatever. And she is a professor now at University of Glasgow as well. So this is her credentials, and this is who we are reading talk about Cuba today. So she says, wait, I have to get my notes out because I put exactly what sections we want to read. Like a little lesson plan. Okay, section 3 is what we're reading here. Looking. Where is it? 3. A history of international sanctions. So in July 1960, 3 months after Mallory's memorandum, and you guys might remember Mallory's memorandum. I'm not sure if you do or not. We showed it when we first started talking about Cuba, but I will find it again just to have it up here. This is Mallory's memorandum, and this was a document, 1960. This is right after the Cuban Revolution happened. The decline and fall of Castro. So they were trying to figure out how to get rid of Castro in Cuba. They'd had Batista there, a US-backed dictator, and Castro overthrew him and had a socialist revolution, worker revolution. And the American government was like, fuck, how do we get rid of this Castro guy? He's really bad for business. So this is what they came out with, the Mallory Memorandum. That's actually really hard to say. So the majority of Cubans support Castro. The lowest estimate that he had seen was 50%, and that's with them looking. There is no effective political opposition to him. Fidel Castro and other members of the Cuban government espouse or condone communist influence. Yeah, they do. Communist influence is pervading the government and the body politic at an amazingly fast rate. They're getting more commie by the day. Militant opposition to Castro from without Cuba would only serve his and the communist cause. Like, we can't just go in and overthrow them. It's just going to make them stronger. And the only foreseeable means of alienating internal support is through disenchantment and disaffection based on economic dissatisfaction and hardship. If the above are accepted or cannot be successfully countered, it follows that every possible means should be undertaken promptly to weaken the economic life of Cuba. So this is what the blockade was born from, this assessment. If such a policy was adopted, where we could go out of our way to weaken them economically, it should be the result of positive decision which would call forth a line of action which, while as adroit and inconspicuous as possible, makes the greatest inroads in denying money and supplies to Cuba. So we talked about this in a stream already. To decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government. So they're like, look, we cannot beat Castro. So what do? We need to destroy Cuba economically so that the people in Cuba demand regime change on our behalf. And this is what we're talking about here, right? This is the Mallory doctrine. And Mallory was a part of their government. What was his official title? Let's look up his official title. He was from the State Department. Okay, he was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs. That was his official title from the State Department. Right, and yeah, as Alexandra Brujo says, 66 years later, where's the color revolution? They couldn't pull it off in 66 years because the people there are deeply committed to their revolution. And what is so interesting is when you talk to people in the United States, they have such a cope, right? They're doing such a cope because they're like, you can't talk to the communists in Cuba. You got to talk to the people who hate communism in Cuba. And you're like, okay, well, 90% of people in Cuba like communism. And they're like, no, that's a lie. They're imprisoned if they say they don't like communism. That's why everyone you talk to there loves communism. And then you're like, well, 10% of their elected officials aren't even communists. So how are they both imprisoned and put in the government? How does that make sense? And they just cannot fathom the idea that these people would like communism. Now, if you know anything about the history of Cuba, though, of course they fucking like communism. They were living in huts with dirt floors and being exploited by American plantation owners and had over a 25% unemployment rate, and people were dying of malnutrition. Like, of course what's going on now is better for them. And that's why we do a historical analysis, right? Because a lot of these people come in and they go, well, that doesn't look as nice as, I don't know, Manhattan, so clearly they're miserable. And you're like, bitch, they weren't comparing it to Manhattan. They never had Manhattan, right? They never had whatever your idea of perfect luxury is. They had oppression. They had oppression and harm at the hands of the capitalist exploiting class over them, the imperialist class over them. So of course they love communism. You don't even have to be a communist to understand why Cubans love communism, right? You don't even have to be a communist to understand why people in the USSR loved communism. You don't have to be a communist to understand why the people of Korea wanted communism. Their conditions were very, very bad under the situation they had before the communism, under imperialism, under colonization, under capitalism. They were barely surviving. So, you know, this stuff shouldn't be surprising to people, but for some reason it is. So when we get over here and we're looking at this document by Jaffe maybe, in July of 1960, 3 months after that memorandum came out, President Eisenhower used the Export Control Act of 1949 to cut Cuban sugar exports to the United States, purportedly in response to Cuba's nationalizations of U.S. sugar interests in Cuba. Cuba responded with further nationalizations of U.S. businesses whose owners were instructed by the U.S. government to reject Cuban offers of compensation because they were trying to buy out companies as well to nationalize the industry there. To comprehend how devastating a measure this was intended to be, it's necessary to recall that Cuba had a monocrop economy dependent on sugar exports to the United States, right? They had these Western-backed sugar plantation owners that were controlling everything, and their main industry there was the sugar plantations, sugar exports, but also they had that mob-run, weird Las Vegas-style setup where it was just like gambling, sex tourism, and drug trafficking as well. So those were the main industries on the island. So Cuba was the world's largest producer and exporter of sugar in the 1950s. Sugar and its byproducts accounted for 86% of the exports, and 80% of Cuban sugar exports were shipped to the United States. The USSR stepped in to purchase all sugar exports dropped from the USA, and the successive tit-for-tat retaliations between the Cuban and US governments has been well documented. It culminated in a full diplomatic and economic rupture between the countries on January 3rd, 1961. Now remember, this is when they're like in literacy campaign mode. They just won the revolution. They are new, and they are already getting into these issues with the world's largest superpower, the United States, because the United States is mad that they're socialists. Subsequent to those first sanctions, the U.S. blockade of Cuba has been enforced through 6 main statutes. So when we say it's a blockade, it's a series of different things. There's 6 main statutes that we're actually talking about here. The 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, Section 5B in particular, 1917, okay? Section 620A of the 1961 Foreign Assistance Act, this came after the Cuban Revolution now that we're looking at these. The 1963 Cuban Assets Control Regulations, specifically about Cuba. The 1992 Cuban Democracy Act, known as the Torricelli Act. The 1996 Cuban Liberty and Democratic Solidarity Act, known as the Helms-Burton Act, and that's going to be important later. And the 2000 Trade Sanctions Reform and Export Enhancement Act. The scope of these regulations is going to be outlined below, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. These sanctions have been targeted at key economic and strategy areas of development in Cuba: sugar, nickel, tourism, and more recently, biotech, because their medical system is so bomb. Right? So they're really trying to hit them where they think it'll hurt. And tourism is a major part of that. That's why there's all these weird tourism laws. So Joy Gordon adds, and the projects that could significantly change Cuba's prospects, such as oil drilling and major infrastructural improvements. So their infrastructure is affected. Now, you've probably seen this in other videos if you've been watching all the Cuba streams we've done. But one of the main things that comes up over and over again is that when something breaks in Cuba, a machine they use to do something, like bake bread, or like do farm work, they can't get the parts to fix the machine. So the machine is just kind of worthless at that point. And that is on purpose. That is part of these blockade measures against them. So that means that they have to do things in kind of an antiquated, less mechanized way, and that makes them look relatively backwards to a Western eye. We'll get to what happened in the 90s for sure. So in 1961, President Eisenhower's administration considered sanctioning Cuba under the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, which prohibits, limits, or regulates trade and financial transactions, including those related to travel, transport, or business in times of war or when a national emergency has been declared. The legislation was invoked in 1963 under President Kennedy. Today, Cuba remains the only country in the world subject to sanctions under this act. So it effectively just became a Cuba Act from 1917. And it's extended every single year with a presidential signature. So if you're like, a liberal right out there and you're thinking, this is a Donald Trump issue, this is a bipartisan issue. Democrats have extended this every single year as well, right? Because Democrats are also violently anti-communist. And this is all anti-communism. This is all anti-communism, and the reason why is that communism is bad for profits. That's it. And this is when we talk about the banality, right, of evil. We talk about the cruelty of the United States. It's just because some rich guy can't get like 12% richer every year that we're doing this to an entire group of people, that we slaughtered communists all over the world, right? That we overthrow governments and subjugate entire nations just because of that. Just because so like a handful of rich dudes can up their profits like, 5%, 6% every single year. It's absolutely horrific. So President Obama, it's pointed out, extended this in 2015 and 2016, confirming Cuba's status as an official enemy, despite restoring diplomatic relations with Cuba and declaring his opposition to the blockade. So he's out there saying one thing and making a big show, and he did ease the blockade conditions a little bit, but he still was signing into law every single year this law that you had to go out of your way to sign to say that Cuba was an enemy, the only country designated such under the Trading with the Enemy Act, right? In September 1961, U.S. Congress approved the Foreign Assistance Act to restructure U.S. overseas support, distinguishing between military and non-military aid, and setting up one of our greatest enemies, what is it? USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. And this was supposed to manage the non-military aid. Now, we know in practice, USAID often operates as a front, a cover for CIA operations, for regime change. Section 620 of this act says, no assistance shall be furnished under this act to the present government of Cuba. Even the regime change agency, they were like, sometimes as a front, we do give assistance to people while trying to do regime change. Cuba can't even get the assistance from it. Cuba can't even get the idea of assistance from USAID. And remember, they didn't need to use USAID to do regime change in Cuba because they'd already had Operation Mongoose going on, which was designed specifically just to destabilize Cuba at this time. So as an additional means of implementing and carrying into effect the policy of the preceding sentence, the president is authorized to establish and maintain a total embargo upon all trade between the U.S. and Cuba. The pretext was the issue of equitable compensation for citizens and entities for property taken by the government of Cuba. And this is going to be really important, especially when we talk about the Helms-Burton Act. Now, this idea is this. The revolution happened. The communists nationalized things. They seized, privatized property. And again, if you're new, not private property, not personal property, not things that you use every single day. Private property in the communist sense of the word, privatized property. They seized massive farmland. And in fact, Castro, one of the first farms that he nationalized was his family's farm. His family was very, very wealthy in Cuba. They owned so many small businesses. One town was nicknamed Castro Town. So he did this to his family's farmland first. He was like, okay, first, not the very first one, but in the first rounds, the first goes, his family's farmland was included. So what does it mean then of equitable compensation to citizens and entities for properties taken by the government of Cuba? Well, if you were a business or a rich guy exploiting people in Cuba and the new Cuban government took your shit and redistributed it, now all of a sudden that's a problem for the United States. And there's a legal pretext for that being a problem. And this is something very, very essential to how we talk about Cuba today as well. The act goes on to prohibit any assistance to any communist country and other countries assisting Cuba. And that's going to be important too. Other countries assisting Cuba. So even though this is just a U.S. blockade, all of a sudden, if you are a country that trades with Cuba, the United States can be like, it looks like you're assisting Cuba. So we're not going to do any business with you. And we're going to talk about why that's such a problem. Thus, already endowing U.S. sanctions with an extraterritorial character, right? Making them worldwide. On February 3rd, 1962, 8 months before Soviet missiles were deployed in Cuba, Kennedy issued Presidential Proclamation 3447, based on the Foreign Assistance Act, to suspend all trade with Cuba. This legislation remains in force. By 1963, the Cuban Assets Control Regulations were issued under Section 5B of that 1917 law, with the expressed goal to isolate the Cuban government economically and deprive it of U.S. dollars. So this has been the setup. So again, people always ask, if communism always fails, or socialism always fails, why does the U.S. government have to spend so much money trying to make it fail, trying to destroy it? Why not just let it fail on its own? And we all know the answer, because communism doesn't fail. It succeeds. So we have to artificially manufacture failure for these communist entities, for these communist countries. We have to create the conditions of failure externally and attempt to inject them into their countries. And that's exactly what we were doing here. We were trying to isolate the Cuban government economically and deprive it of U.S. dollars because we knew socialism there would not just fail on its own. So Cuban assets in the United States were frozen, and all financial and commercial transactions were prohibited unless approved by a permit. Now remember, just 4 years earlier, most of Cuba's economy was dealing with trade with the United States. And even if that was something they were hoping to get away from, 4 years to change your entire economy around? Come on, that's not realistic. So realistically, they were already doing business with the United States. So they had this mixed up, messy financial relationship with the United States that they were trying to pick apart and untangle while all this was happening. Cuban assets get frozen as a result of that, right? Financial commercial transactions are prohibited unless approved by a permit. And as were the direct and indirect exports of U.S. products, services, and technology to Cuba, while Cuban exports to the U.S. were prohibited as well. Also banned were transactions in U.S. dollars in Cuba by any citizen of the United States or any third country. And even when I was in Cuba, you can't buy apps, you can't download apps from the App Store. There's just certain things you can't do. So additionally, this is when you see people on TikTok say they're Cuban, they don't live on the island. They don't, because Cubans can't get TikTok there, and it has to do with stuff like this. This was enforced by the U.S. Treasury Department through penalties imposed for violations by its Office of Foreign Assets Controls. Penalties rose to a maximum of 10 years in prison, corporate fines of up to $1 million, and individual fines of up to $250,000, with civil penalties up to $55,000. These sanctions might have brought the Cuban Revolution to its knees, since the Platt Amendment of 1901, followed by the Trade Reciprocity Treaty of 1904, the Jones-Costigan-Sugar Act of 1934, U.S. legislation in the early 20th century had fostered Cuba's economic dependence on the United States for trade, investment, and loans. And this is important. We set it up where they needed us. We didn't allow them to develop their own normal economy. We set up their economy to be tied to us, and then we took that all away very, very instantly, right? And this is similar to what we did with Venezuela as well. So I just want to point that out. The United States set that system up because they were operating as a neo-colony of the USA. Right? So, it's not like they were just a normal country doing their thing, and then we were like, we don't want to be involved. No, we were like, gun to your head, you're involved with only us for 100 years. Don't talk to anybody else, don't look at anybody else, you only talk to us. And then one day we were like, and now you're never allowed to say another word to us again. Have fun. So this was a major shock to their system, right? Oh, sorry. Now, getting into this, because of the results of this, the independents, they had complicated financial arrangements with us for trade, for investment, and for loans. Meanwhile, the US dollar was established as the basis for international trade in 1944. And remember, Cuba's not allowed to do anything in the US dollar. And now it's the basis for all international trade. The Soviet Union's decision to step in and assist the Cubans after Deputy Premier Anastas Mikoyan visited the island in February 1960 threw a lifeline to the revolutionary government. Cuba's trade with the USSR and the Socialist Bloc and its full integration from the mid-1970s into the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance was not without problems from the technical, geographical, and economic perspective. However, there is no doubt that this was decisive for the survival of the Cuban Revolution and cushioned the island from the impact of the United States blockade. That came to an end, however, between 1989 and 1991, as the Socialist Bloc collapsed, generating a severe economic crisis as Cuba lost around 87% of its trade and investment. Now, this period in Cuban history is known as the Special Period. And I would say, based on what I've read about the Special Period, and I've talked to people about the Special Period, it seems like the Special Period was way worse than what Cuba's going through right now. When I asked other people, and I'd be like, does this feel like the Special Period? They'd be like, no, the Special Period was way worse than this. Oh, it was so bad. Older people would tell me that. So, during the Special Period, they had like no oil. Everybody was riding bicycles. Riding a bicycle became a revolutionary act because they had nothing. And they all knew the Soviet Union has been dismantled. We lost our biggest trading partner. We're going to have to start to develop even more internally. I also want you guys to remember when we talk about this, Cuba's small. It is small. It's so small when we started talking about Venezuela earlier this year because of the horrible things the United States government was doing in Venezuela. I was stuck in Cuba convo, and I was like, small, tiny island. All these people were like, babe, you're talking about Venezuela, not Cuba. And I was like, fuck. Yes. But the way I naturally have described Cuba, always small, tiny island. It is a small, tiny island. It is a quarter the size of California, this whole country. So if you live in a province of some kind, a state, if you're in the United States, province, whatever, what have you, think about if your province had to create everything it needed for your society to function within its borders. Think about the natural resources you have access to where you live. Think about what you don't have access to. Think about the weather where you live. Think about if you deal with snow. I mean, they don't deal with snow, but weather patterns, hurricanes, whatever. These are all going to affect your ability to be able to run a completely isolated economy. It's just very challenging. You're not going to have the level of modern world feel, right, that we get from having a interconnected global trade situation. Even when you think about food, if you live in a place that's super, super cold, you need to import food from an area not dealing with frost if you want a healthy, well-rounded kind of diet available to you. Probably. Depending on where you live, you might not be able to grow anything at all. Here in California, we're able to grow food. Okay, that's nice. But it's not like we grow a bunch of corn. We would struggle to start planting corn crops because corn we get from the Midwest. These kinds of things you really have to think about. And when you're talking about trying to exist completely internally yourself without access to foreign trade, the size of your land, the location of your land matters. And Cuba's great at things. Cuba's great at tobacco farming, sugar farming, right? But they can't produce everything. They don't have the space, and they don't have the variety of natural resources available to it. The United States would fare better on the whole, but it's also massive. So that's why I say think about your province. Think about something around the same size as Cuba, which is around 10 million people, right? Think about an area of around 10 million people. New York City, for example. And imagine you've got to do it all just within your borders. drilling noise right now? My neighbor's mowing their lawn. Is it maybe that? Oh, no, it's not Friday. It's not mine. I think it's my neighbor mowing their lawn. So this is what maybe it's a leaf blower. Yeah, my neighbor's doing yard work of some kind. I don't know what it is. Oh, hi, Comrade Dexy. Welcome. Like a video game. Cool. Yeah, we got Foley effects. We're leveling up. Think about the horrors of isolation from the world. So this is what's going on. We're trying to cut them off, but at the same time, they've had this relationship with us that makes them reliant on us for trade, investment, and loans. We established the US dollar as the basis for international trade, and we say, Cuba, you're not allowed to do anything in the US dollar. That's our money. What now? So now you're even more cut off from the rest of the world because of that. The special period comes about. They lose their only remaining trading partner. They are plunged into darkness. They are taking bicycles to get around. They are struggling. And in this time, they start trying to figure out how to become more self-sufficient even than they had been before. But it's hard. Cuba's GDP nosedived by 1/3 in just 3 years. The story of how they survived this special period of economic crisis has been told a number of times. I've read some books about it. You can find info on the special period. But the Cuban economy was restructured for reintegration into a capitalist world market operating under neoliberalism and dominated by its nemesis, the United States. The Cubans demonstrated remarkable resilience and creativity, even while opponents in the United States, government agencies, and right-wing Cuban exiles acted fast to hasten the revolution's downfall. So they were really, the United States was like, yes, and now we get our chance. Now you go neoliberal, now you become one of us. And Cuba was like, we'll do some market liberalization. NEP style. Think NEP if you are into the USSR. Think Deng if you are into China. Cuba was like, we got to do something to survive, but we're not giving you our whole revolution. No way. Oh, Melme, what a win. So in 1992, President George W. Bush signed the Cuban Democracy, sometimes called the Torricelli Act. Its key sponsor, Democrat Congressman Robert Torricelli, boasted that the legislation would wreak havoc on the island. The legislation prohibits foreign-based subsidiaries of U.S. companies in third countries from trading with Cuba or with Cuban nationals. So I just want to repeat that. It says if you're a foreign-based subsidiary of a U.S. company, you cannot trade with Cuba or with Cuban nationals. So think about how many multinational massive corporations we have that are headquartered in the United States, just in the world. All of those companies, it doesn't matter if they have any of their million little subsidiaries out there in the world, those subsidiaries can't do any business in Cuba. So we start to talk about things like Cuba has access to food. They don't have certain foods they need. Think about like the maps you've seen of these corporations that are all, owned by one company. So I'm thinking Procter & Gamble, for example. I'm going to look up a map of this. When you look at something like this, there's just a handful of companies that have all of these other little companies operating under them. Some of them aren't based in the United States, but a lot of them are based in the United States. So all of a sudden, let's say you're Procter & Gamble, you're based in the United States. Now, none of these companies can go there. And this is a lot of over-the-counter medication. This is things like baby powder. This is foods, right? So this is all cut off from you now because of this. It doesn't matter even if your subsidiary is based in another country. They can't do business with Cuba. I know, I'm sorry. Hold on, let me see if I can find a bigger one. Let's see if I can find a bigger one. All right. Here we go. So if any of these companies under these American-owned, like think Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola does bottling in Mexico, right? And I have a podcast episode about that. If you're not familiar with that relationship, it's insane. It's called Coca-Colonization. You can find it, Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, it's the podcast, and it's mostly about history. Here we usually try to talk about current events. But yeah, look at all these, and you'll start to realize the scope of things that they're really not able to get access to. Even if the subsidiary company isn't based in the United States. They just can't do it. They just can't do it. Cuba's off limits for them, right? Oh, cracked my back. I don't know if you guys heard that. It felt good. And they knew this was going to be major. That's why they're like, oh, this is going to destroy Cuba. This is going to wreak havoc on the island. And they banned foreign ships docking in Cuba from entering U.S. ports for 6 months. This is another thing to really think about. How does the U.S. blockade seem to affect the whole world trading with Cuba? Well, once a ship goes to Cuba, it's not allowed to come to the United States for any reason for 6 months. Right? That's wild. So if you're a ship and you're dropping off your deliveries all over the world and you're a trade ship, every time you go to Cuba, you lose 6 months worth of trade with the United States. Think about how small Cuba is. Think about how big the United States is. Are you going to compromise the loss in that massive amount of business just to do a little bit of trade with Cuba? No. The only reason you would do it is if you were ideologically doing it. If you were a communist place. If you were a socialist and you're like, fuck this, what's right is right. And there were some people who did that, who were like, ideologically, we are so opposed to this, we know it's wrong, so we'll take the hit. Most people didn't, though, because most people exist in capitalism. Profits come first, right? So it just doesn't make sense. They also banned foreign ships docking in Cuba. Oh, we said this part. They barred travel to Cuba by U.S. citizens and limited family remittances to the island. So if you had family in Cuba and you were living in the United States, now it became harder for you to send money there to them. Foreign countries providing assistance to Cuba would also be ineligible for foreign assistance and debt reduction or relief. So if you ever give Cuba $1, don't come to us for anything, even if you have a disaster of some kind. Sorry, you gave money to Cuba one time. We're not doing anything for you. The Torricelli Act declares medical goods can be exported to Cuba if the president determines that the United States government is able to verify by on-site inspections and other appropriate means that the exported item is to be used for the purpose for which it was intended and only for the use and benefit of the Cuban people. Does that sound like something that's going to make it easy for medical supplies to reach Cuba? No, absolutely not. No. And this is why when we saw the doctor, when we did our episode about healthcare, we saw the doctor saying, there's all the stuff they need. And I don't know if this was in the videos, but she's like, large syringes to give people medication in large doses. We can't get that. We cannot get that. So nobody dies, but guess what we have to do? We have to use 1 million tiny little syringes to get them their medication. And it's just this total inefficient, slow down process that just makes life harder than it needs to be, right? So this is the kind of stuff going on. They don't have a lot of over-the-counter medications. When they go to the pharmacy, the pharmacist was like, we can't get everything we need here. We're not able to get it all. So when you travel to Cuba, one of the things they ask for is over-the-counter medication. So I packed, your Twitch subscriptions, which thank you guys so much, paid for like over 4,000 ibuprofen alone, just to bring ibuprofen to these people. Now, obviously, their medical system is very, very developed, and for the priority things, they just make it themselves. But that even became a threat to the United States. And that's when the United States was like, also now you're not allowed to export your biotech. Remember, Cuba made 5 COVID vaccines, tried to give them to the United States, and we were like, no. Cuba has a lung cancer vaccine. They're not allowed to give that to the United States. So it's this very mismatched, odd kind of thing developing. Right? Yes, I trafficked drugs to Cuba. Exactly. Add that. That's what I was doing in my airplane. It was an Air America private jet full of drugs in the back. That's a deep cut for the real commies, that one. So donations of medicines for humanitarianism purposes can be made to NGOs, but not to public healthcare systems in Cuba. So when people were like, that stuff's not reaching us directly, that's also the U.S. government's doing. Right? Like, hello? That's the blockade. Exports must be granted an export license, but applications for most goods are subject to a policy of denial. Section 6006 states food, medicine, and medical supplies for humanitarian purposes can only be made when Cuba has taken steps to introduce what the U.S. president deems to be free and fair elections for a new government. Now, they have free and fair elections. They have direct elections for the members of their assembly. That's not good enough, though. They want capitalist elections. They're saying you're only going to be able to... Look, first of all, we cut off your ability to do business with the rest of the world. Sorry. You can't trade with anybody. Nobody's going to trade with you. Hope you can figure it out on your own, Cuba. Oh, and if you can't figure it out on your own and you end up in a state of need where you need humanitarian aid, we'll totally give it to you as long as you agree to overthrow your socialist government and implement a capitalist one instead. This is what they basically did to the Cuban people. This was the intention of all of this. For sanctions to be waived, the president must report, for a new government, the president must report to Congress that, among other conditions, Cuba has held free and fair elections, they have free and fair elections, is moving towards establishing a free market economic system, that's capitalism, and has committed itself to constitutional change, is no longer doing socialism of any kind, has abandoned the revolution. In imposing these conditions, the Torricelli Act blatantly violates the declaration of the UN General Assembly of December 1960, which states, all people have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. So this violates the UN Charter. It doesn't matter, though. We're violating the UN all the time, right? We're violating them constantly. So this is a brief overview of what we mean when we say the blockade and what it actually looks like there, right? Now, there's also some more info about this we have from the National Security Archive. And if you guys haven't been on the National Security Archive, this is a horrible website. It is a great resource, though. You can find so much on here. If you have ever looked into Douglas Valentine's work, you can find the full audio files available for download of Douglas Valentine interviewing CIA officers that he used to write all of his books about the CIA. As Fidel said, that whoever attempts to conquer Cuba will only gain its blood-soaked soil if they do not first perish in combat. Exactly. Yeah, so powerful. Yes. So, National Security Archives has a section about these trade sanctions. And this is one of the declarations of the sanctions. And they say, our original intent was to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the Castro government. And a secret CIA study concluded political costs of the embargo outweighed the benefit to the United States, which is interesting. So National Security Archives has a ton of great info here that you can access for free. Oh, come on, you had your first PSL interview. Yay. Nice. How'd it go? Yay. Before President Kennedy signed the embargo order, he ordered top White House aides to locate and purchase over 1,000 Cuban cigars for his personal use. Just want to throw that out there. Wild. Absolutely wild. So on the eve of the 60th anniversary, this is from 2022, of President JFK's executive order imposing an embargo on all trade with Cuba, the National Security Archive today posts a collection of previously declassified documents that records the origins, rationale, and early evolution of punitive economic sanctions against Cuba in the aftermath of the Castro-led revolution. The documents show that the initial concept of U.S. economic pressure was to create hardship and disenchantment among the Cuban populace, and to deny money and supplies to Cuba, to decrease monetary and real wages, and to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government. However, a CIA case study of the embargo, written 20 years after its imposition, concluded that the sanctions, quote, have not met any of their objectives. The selected declassified records chart the secret deliberations of both President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who cut sugar imports from Cuba and restricted U.S. exports, and President Kennedy, who imposed a full trade embargo against the island nation on February 3, 1962. They also examined the lard scandal that led the LBJ administration to add food and medicine to the embargo, Henry Kissinger's considerations of using the embargo as a bargaining chip to potentially normalize relations, and the Jimmy Carter administration's resistance to congressional efforts to lift restrictions on the trade of food and medicine to maintain leverage in negotiations with the Castro government on engagement. And I'll make you guys a tiny URL for this. You should definitely save this for later to look at it in detail. They have all the declassified documents on there already located for you. We love the National Security Archive. It is a great resource. You were supposed to smoke a cigar with your husband on your wedding night, but you turned over to break your nicotine sobriety. That makes sense. My LA partner is very addicted to nicotine and is always like, not worth it. So I would be afraid of that too. I understand that. So this is the link to the National Security Archives resource on this. And again, their website's not great, but you'll see at the bottom they have the links to all of the documents here that you can look at. So this is all laid out. A secret 1982 CIA case study is included that says the sanctions were, quote, significantly damaging to Cuba's growth and general development, but that the embargo had failed to meet its objectives and the political costs outweighed the benefits. So again, don't fall into the binary thinking on this, that it's literally murdering them all as we speak, or it's literally fake and not real and doing nothing. Neither of those are true. Some conservatives will try to tell you the blockade's not real. That's a crazy thing to say as well. No, the blockade is real, and it does damage Cuba's economic growth and general development, but it's not putting them in this crisis situation where they are eager to abandon the revolution and jump into capitalism. In his comprehensive chronology of the 60-year evolution of the embargo, American University professor William M. Leogrande describes it as a complex patchwork of laws, presidential proclamations, and regulations that Fidel Castro once called a tangled ball of yarn. By child. So again, it's not just one thing. It's a number of things that have been backed and endorsed and enforced by Democrats and Republicans alike. According to Peter Kornbluh, who directs the Archives Cuba Documentation Project, quote, the endless embargo has become an enduring symbol of perpetual hostility in the U.S. posture towards Cuba. And again, what did Cuba ever do to us? Nothing. So the U.S. economic embargo, Virgo says, I had someone tell me there's no military blockade, they aren't seizing ships, and I sent them a link to an article about trade ships were seized before they could get to Cuba because of the blockade, and they said, that's not a blockade in response. Absolutely wild. And blockade does not have a legal descriptor. It is just, again, we'll see this here. El bloqueo, the blockade, as Cubans refer to it, is not a single law. It's a complex patchwork of law. So it's not like the blockade law is this, or like an economic blockade is literally this. It's a turn of phrase to describe a number of different things, right? They did a communism, worst thing they could have ever done, so now the United States must destroy them, right? Yay, Comrade Dexy, hi. So this is a timeline. It goes over the memorandum we read, right? The Mallory Memorandum. Then we have the Bay of Pigs invasion, which you guys remember is when we got together a bunch of gusanos and then shipped them to Cuba and tried to make them forcefully overthrow the government. Did not go well. Then we have LBJ trying to enforce more harshly the economic crackdown since the militarized action had failed. And when the United States does warfare, we do this thing called hybrid warfare. So it's not just one thing. We don't just show up with weapons. We do weapons, we do economic tactics, and we do propaganda. That's our hybrid warfare campaign. All those things work together. So this is still warfare. It's just economic warfare against them. And that's because our militarized warfare did not succeed on its own. So all of this goes through this timeline. You can check out this timeline in more detail, right? It talks about how the dissolution of the USSR impacted them. Anti-communism is white people's culture. It is. It really is. And it's wild because I want to tell you Marx is some white people shit. Meanwhile, look around the world, babes. All the communist places aren't the white places. We had one of those. It was Russia. And only some of Russia was white. Everybody else, not white people. And who's trying to destroy them and murder them and slaughter them? The communists all around the world. Who are people of color. It's all white people. Anti-communism is white supremacy. It truly is. Yes, I posted the tiny URL for this. Yeah. Anti-communism, pumpkin spice, ethnic cleansing. This is white culture. As a white person, as a French person, I can tell you this is French culture as well. So yeah, this will give you all this info if you want to look into this in more details. Now, the thing that's notable here is that Obama restored people-to-people travel in Cuba and reversed Bush's limits on academic exchanges. Now, you might remember this period where a bunch of influencers started going to Cuba in this time period. Do you guys remember this? When a bunch of influencers went to Cuba? I'm going to see if I can find some info on this. For vacation. So this actually ended up being The Guardian. U.S. travel to Cuba surged 36% following a thaw in diplomatic relations. So Americans were circumventing tourism restrictions by visiting via other countries. They were always wanting to go there, right? And this was always the thing. So I think this is why when people say you can just go to DPRK, enter through China, I think they're thinking about this with Cuba. But this is not really what it was, right? So let me see. The people-to-people travel trend was around 2014, I think. I'm trying to find it. I'm not able to find it. I feel like the Kardashians went to Cuba. Yes, they did. They did. In May 2016 is when they went to Cuba and they filmed an episode there. This is what I'm thinking of. So the Kardashians went to Cuba and it became this trend for people to go to Cuba. I know I was just there. I'm not an influencer though. It's different. I'm an average person. I forget that people think I'm an influencer. It's so funny to me. Which, like, no hate to the influencers. Unionize the influencers. Underpaid tech workers. But yeah, this era. This was like a massive era where everybody was doing this. People are dying, Kim. Yeah, so, yeah, I need a reality TV show. Yeah. They can point out all my hypocrisy and make me billions of dollars. And I'll sell products. So this is from Obama. Now, a lot of Cubans will be like, it was cool when Obama was around. We just go back to Obama stuff. They don't say this because they love Barack Obama. They say this because Obama is the only U.S. president who kind of somewhat even a little bit normalized things, right? And it's not like they want to be best friends with the United States. They just want their lives to be a little easier. So they're like, that was cool. You can go back to that. This is what they're talking about. These changes that Obama made, they didn't end the blockade, but eased it a little bit. But as we saw from our previous text we read, Obama still signed into law that paperwork saying that they were still going to be eligible for that 1917 economic sanctions kind of package. You don't remember? I remember them going to Cuba because I remember being like, I want to go to Cuba. They don't deserve Cuba. Right? So, Trump then comes along and retightens things up in Cuba. And what does that look like? Now, as the 2020 presidential campaign began, Trump took a series of measures to further tighten the embargo. June 2019, September 2019, September 2020, October 2020. He imposed new limits on family remittances, eliminated non-family donative remittances entirely. You can't just send money to Cuba. He prohibited U.S. remittance service providers from dealing with their Cuban counterpart, FinCEMEX, because it was managed by the armed forces. The result was an end of all wire transfers of remittances from the United States. So the reason why people have to go to Cuba to bring them things is because you can't just send them things. You have to literally get on a plane and go there and bring it, because it's a huge issue. He abolished the people-to-people travel category completely, eliminating the general license for travel to professional meetings and cultural and artistic performances in Cuba, thereby eliminating most cultural and scientific exchange. New regulations banned U.S. cruise ships from visiting Cuba, prohibited U.S. travelers from staying in any hotel, quote, controlled by the Cuban government, which was almost all of them. Travelers were thus limited to private bed and breakfasts. But not Airbnb, I don't think. Can you still do Airbnb? Let me see if you can Airbnb in Cuba. As an American. I don't know if you can. I guess you can. I guess these count because you're technically an independent contractor. I don't know how they're accessing the Airbnb website in Cuba, though, if I'm being perfectly honest. I'm not sure how Airbnb works in Cuba. Oh my God, it's beautiful. This is crazy. Wow. So this is the area I'm guessing people thought we stayed in. No, this is not where we stayed. That would be an interesting thing for us to look up one day. Yeah, state-run hotels. But again, it's like only 20% of their entire island is private enterprise, their economy. 80% of their economy is state enterprise. So that's like 80% of everything, right? Russia is giving oil to Cuba. What do we think about this? Of course, Russia fighting our wars for us, right? Continuing to do the work. And Americans will sit back and talk shit about Russia. You know? It's a win. It's a win. So, then, extending the embargo's extraterritorial reach, Trump reimposed the ban on international financial U-turn transactions and allowed Title III of the Cuban Liberty and Democratic Solidarity Act to go into effect, setting off a wave of litigation against U.S. and international companies doing business with Cuba. We're going to talk about this. Title III of what we call the Helms-Burton Act is a major thing that Donald Trump activated. He didn't create it, but it was not active, and he activated it. And we're going to talk about what that looks like for them as well. And in 2019, the State Department returned Cuba to the list of state sponsors of international terrorism. Cuba has never attacked another country. Cuba has never attacked another country. Ever. So, interesting. Now, what is going on with this in practice? What does it actually look like? So some of these sanctions are a little complicated. So I found something really easy to talk about it. ProSlop. We got ProSlop news. USA Today. Right? Okay. So we got the USA Today making it real simple for the masses. There's a huge range of issues we can discuss with the U.S. that we are pretty sure are for the benefit of the national interests of the United States and the national interests of Cuba, says Torres Rivera, who's a top Cuban diplomat, talking about what's been going on with Washington and Havana. Now, this is a relatively recent news story. This is from yesterday, right? And Torres Rivera said, so the U.S. wants to be engaged in the economic transformation in Cuba? Okay, fine, let's do it. She said that what they could do is ease restrictions under the U.S. embargo on Cuba that bars Cuba from buying any product made with at least 10% of U.S. components. Now, this is something we didn't talk about. If 10% of an item is made with something from the U.S., it's eligible for the U.S. sanctions and the U.S. embargoes. Or, sorry, not the sanctions, the U.S. embargoes. It's eligible for the terms of the blockade. And if you accidentally trade something with Cuba that has only 10% of something in it made in the USA that you didn't know about, oh, you're fucked. You just done something illegal. You violated the United States blockade against Cuba. And that's going to be bad for you. So a lot of people are like, I don't know if 10% of whatever, like pick anything. This. I don't know if 10% of this came from the United States. Fuck. I'm just not going to sell it to Cuba, I guess. Because that's going to be way more harm than it's worth. So this is how a lot of companies end up then not doing business with Cuba. Right? So that's one way. Now, Trump waiving Title III of the Helms-Burton Act without having to ask Congress to overturn the full ban, making it easier for the United States to do business in Cuba. This is what Cubans are like, yeah, get rid of that weird 10% rule. If you want to help Cuba's economic development, hey, maybe stop doing that Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, right? That's a problem. We're going to talk about what that is in a second. Removing Cuba from the State Department's list of state sponsors of terrorism. That would help us. So this is Cuba being sassy. They're like, oh, the United States wants to talk about Cuba's economic development? Let's talk, babe. Here's some things you could do. Here's some things you could do to help the Cuban economy. Since you care so much about the Cuban economy, here's three things you could do today, right? Now, this obviously is not going to happen. This is not what the United States was talking about. The United States was talking about forcing them to go capitalist. It's very, very annoying. Donald Trump is still like, oh, we're just going to seize Cuba. The Cuban people are like, no, you're not. Like, hell, you are. We saw videos from Cuban people that were like, if you come here, we will fight you. Like, you do not get our country. We've seen all of this, right? So, comments by Torres Rivera and other Cuban officials point to a willingness by the Cuban government to reform economically and expand business ties with the United States. No, they don't. USA Today is stupid pro-slop. They don't know what they're saying here. These comments do not point to a willingness to improve relationships with the United States. This is the Cuban government being sassy and being like, if you care so much about our economy, stop fucking with our economy. And you'll notice nothing on here has anything to do with them wanting to increase business with the United States. It has everything to do with them wanting to be able to trade freely with the rest of the world. So none of this is what the USA Today is trying to spin it like they want to be capitalist. See? No. That is not what's happening here. None of this is we want to be capitalist. This is all, hey, United States, just let us trade with the rest of the planet. What the fuck's wrong with you? And that's literally what's going on here. So we're going to have to talk about the Helms-Burton Act. The Helms-Burton Act basically makes it so that companies can sue Cuba in U.S. courts for damages and win. And that's like this weird, that's what Title III of the Helms-Burton Act is. It's kind of hard to understand the scenarios, though, without examples. So I pulled up some examples that will talk to you about what that manifests and looks like. It's very, very, very fucking weird, right? Now, the USA Today does say most countries, including several top U.S. allies, have formally encouraged the United States to end the embargo through their support of an annual resolution in the UN. For 33 consecutive years, the UN has voted in favor of trying to pressure the United States to end this blockade. However, it's not a UN blockade. It's a United States blockade. They don't have any jurisdiction over us, right? They can't control that. Torres Rivera pointed to the UN resolution, this is the Cuban diplomat, as evidence that the U.S. is on the wrong side of the issue. Americans are welcome in Cuba. U.S. companies are welcome in Cuba. Cuban Americans are welcome in Cuba to invest or trade, she said. Our country would be, the standard of living of the Cuban people could have been very different if we could do all this. So they're like, we've never had a problem with you guys. You guys have a problem with us. And if you care so much about the Cuban standard of living, I don't know, try being fucking normal to us. And that's literally what she's saying here. Just be fucking normal to us. Why are you guys so weird? And that's really what's going on. Now, Trump, though, is saying Cuba has to basically go full capitalist to do any of this shit, allow international investors to hire Cuban workers directly, or privatize government-held entities such as hotels, which is wild. And that's everything Donald Trump says needs to happen before they end the embargo. Basically, don't have any state-owned enterprise, just privatize everything. And then we'll come in. Neoliberal, like, dream porn is what they fucking want, right? It's absolutely horrifying. And that's not going to happen. The Cuban people aren't going to do that. They're not going to do that. So the 10% rule, you know, the thing that really gets a lot of people is that they're not going to risk losing the United States as a trade partner because they accidentally traded something with Cuba that has 10% of it made in Cuba and they didn't realize. And what's important to know is that the United States is one of the largest trade factors on the planet. The United States is the second largest goods exporter in the world, and they are the largest good importer in the world. So to lose this business is significant for other countries. And that is really one of the things that pressures other countries into complying with this, because they are terrified of losing the United States as a market, because we are one of the biggest markets on the planet. We are the biggest market in the planet for imports, right? And second biggest for exports. So this is why it effectively becomes a total blockade that affects more than just the United States government. Other countries are pressured into it because of this. Then there's the whole issue with that Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, which we were talking about. And this looks a little weird, but I'm going to try to explain it. This is Science Open in a way that everybody understands a little bit more. And this might be a little bit difficult. We're just going to go to Title III, though, of it, and we're going to discuss it. Protection of property rights of U.S. nationals, and then we're going to give some real-world examples after this. This allows U.S. nationals to initiate judicial proceedings in U.S. courts. So American citizens can sue in U.S. courts any foreign person or entity that traffics with American property nationalized by the Cuban Revolution after January 1st, 1959. So they can sue you if you are a company that does business trading with Cuba, but maybe you bought, for example, sugar from a plantation that Castro nationalized after the revolution. So let's say the revolution happens. All these businesses that were privately owned businesses by Americans, they get turned into national entities. They get turned into nationally owned farms, nationally owned hotels, whatever. If you are a person or a company, and you're like, hey, I love that farm in Cuba. I want to buy some of their spinach, some of their kale. But that farm, you didn't know, actually used to belong to a guy in the United States before the Cubans kicked him out during the revolution. Now that guy can go sue you in an American court and be like, that's technically my money. That should have been my farm. And now you are on the hook to pay this guy out damages. So this is what's going on with Title III of this law. So how much do you want the Cuban kale, the Cuban spinach, the Cuban farm food? If there's a chance that some rich dude in the United States is going to sue you because 60 years ago, his wealthy ass stupid family owned that plantation. You're looking for girlfriend, you found me. You found they friend. I'm so sorry. Not girlfriend, they friend. And this is really how insane this law is. It's insane. So this is another reason why people are like, dude, not worth the fucking hassle. I am not gonna do that. That is wild. Now, let's look at some examples of this that a law firm has put together. Arnold and Porter law firms talking about this. What does this actually look like in real life, in real time? So since Donald Trump activated this in 2019, I believe is when he activated this. Yeah, 2019. Plaintiffs have filed 40 lawsuits under this in just 2 years, the first 2 years, because this is old, this is from 2021. So in 2 years, 40 lawsuits were filed under this act, right? And this affects different industries like mining, sugar, tobacco, advertising, banking, construction, and ranching. Out of all those suits, 17 were dismissed. 5 voluntarily, 5 people were like, never mind. 12 were dismissed by court order. That's good, right? But some were entering litigation on this. So what does this look like? So we have some examples. First is a case brought by the heirs of Roberto Gomez Cabrera. Before 1960, Gomez allegedly owned 21 mines located in and around the town of El Cobre in the Oriente province. The Cuban government confiscated, allegedly, the real and personal property of Gomez's company, Minera Rogosca S.A. Now, Gomez passed away in September 1969, and his claims to Minera Rogosca's mines were inherited by his children, who in turn seem to have pooled their claims into an entity by the name of Herederos de Roberto Gomez Cabrera, LLC. Herederos sued Tech Resources Limited under Title III for allegedly trafficking in the confiscated mines from at least 1994 to 2009. So you can do this retroactively too. In late April, the district court dismissed the complaint on multiple grounds that are dismissed below. Thank God. Okay? But this is one example of the type of lawsuits these fucking people are trying to bring up. Right? You know, it's like, these are just some rich kids whose dad owned a mine, 21 mines in Cuba. I'm sure the workers in those mines were treated great. I'm sure the Cuban people working for this guy were doing stunning, right? No. And now these fucking rich kids are trying to sue people for doing business with the mines in Cuba. It's absolutely wild. So, then we've got the cases of North American sugar industries. For over half a century, they owned and operated massive sugar plantations in Cuba that included land, crops, and refineries, as well as a massive transportation network, including large commercial shipping ports. The property was confiscated during the Revolution, and in 1969, as well it should have been, and in 1969, American Sugar used the U.S. Foreign Claims Settlement Commission process, that they were discussing here, in order to certify the value of its expropriated assets at over $97 million. So they took $97 million of the sugar plantations from me. Ugh! And this is where the memes come from. I don't care if Castro took your fucking family's sugar plantations. North American Sugar Industries. I don't care. Good. He should have. You were basically enslaving people to work in these sugar plantations for you in Cuba. This is horrible. $100 million worth of value, right? So what happens? So they say that one of their confiscated shipping ports, Puerto Carupano, was used by defendants to deliver equipment to a nearby wind farm project, the largest wind power project in Cuba. So these people have been trying to do alternative fuel forever, and guess what? They can't even fucking do that. They can't even set up fucking wind fuel. Why? Because some rich-ass American fucks are going to come in here and are going to sue them because you're using a port that daddy used to own, and now we're not as rich anymore. Give us money for that. I mean, this shit is so fucking bonkers. It's so fucking evil. It's deeply, deeply evil. Right? I can't even fathom how evil you have to be to do this. And these are all fucking rich people, you know? These are all people who are already fucking rich. These psychos. Exactly, the meme. You're laughing? Castro took my grandfather's slaves away and you're laughing? Yeah, exactly that. This is what's going on. So, they claim that 2 Chinese companies, Xinjiang Goldwind Science and Technology and Goldwind International Holdings, transported their wind turbines and related equipment through the port on the way to the wind farm project. China can't even get involved to fucking help them develop wind-powered energy without the United States rich oligarchy on some fuck-ass bullshit, right? American Sugar claims the shipment was carried in vessels chartered and operated by BBC Chartering USA and BBC Chartering Singapore, and that DSV Air and Sea Inc. provided additional transportation and logistical services. And they have sued all 5 companies. This is fucking wild, right? And this is so insane. Oh, the streamer had his grandma on stream talking about the show. Wasn't it Destiny? Was it Destiny? Both Destiny and Vaush have aggressively tried to debate me, it's worth noting, and I didn't know who they were. And I was like, who the fuck are these people, and why do they have so many freaks in my comment section being like, yeah, are you gonna do the debate? Are you gonna do the debate? And I'm like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? What debate? And then I looked it up, and one of them, Destiny and Vaush, both. Destiny, I was like, this guy's making Gusano fucking live stream content? What a psycho. These people are fucking psychopaths. Yeah, they're weird losers. And Cat Black in that whole crowd, part of that whole scene of weirdos that are strangely obsessed with me. Yeah, Virgo says it was Destiny when asked the grandma where they were from. She said she didn't know it was her grandpa's sugar plantation. Exactly. Yup. Okay, so that is what's going on with these fucking cases. So when you have all of this going on, you as a company are just like, this isn't worth it. This is not worth it. The only reason you would trade with Cuba is a deep ideological commitment to doing the right thing. And capitalism does not exactly reward that, right? So you don't have a lot of companies out there doing that. So it's very, very hard. So this is how the United States, on our little fuck-ass shit, right? Oh, we're mad at Cuba. Oh, we're mad at Cuba because they're socialists in our backyard. This is how it ends up being a global blockade that affects the ability of Cubans to get everything to them now from all over the world. And it's not everything, but it's a consideration every time they do business with anybody about anything. Now, Trump obviously has put in place this maximum pressure campaign on Cuba. And this is also a story from yesterday. And this is from the Council for Foreign Relations. This is a more like center-right kind of org, is what I would say. If you're right-wing, sometimes they get a little more libertarian-y. I don't know where you want to put that, right? So, since January, the Donald Trump administration has severely limited oil shipments to Cuba, a decision which has sparked fuel shortages, sharp price increases, and prolonged power outages. The country has already experienced 3 nationwide blackouts in March. Cuba's recent economic and energy crisis, and again, those blackouts lasted for, I don't know, less than 36 hours for most parts of the island. I just want to say. Some parts of the island, rural parts, obviously suffered more. They prioritize the places where more people are, and if you are in a rural area, it's worse. It's worse in rural areas, right? So senior U.S. officials have indicated the end goal of these policies is to bring about political and economic liberalization in Cuba, to change them, to make them not socialist anymore and make them go capitalist. That's the goal. And to remove President Miguel Diaz-Canel from power. And they're saying, this system doesn't work. This system doesn't work. I think it's worked pretty fucking well, given what the United States has been doing. The United States has tried to destroy Cuba. And we saw from the National Security Archives, they haven't even been able to. They've been trying actively to destroy Cuba with this program, and they have not been able to. All they've succeeded in doing is making life really fucking annoying for the Cuban people, which is messed up, and they shouldn't have to deal with it. It's making their lives harder. They shouldn't have to. But they have not succeeded in destroying Cuba. So to say that this is a system that doesn't work is, as Parenti says, to ignore the fact that it does. To say socialism doesn't work is to ignore the fact that it does. To say Cuba's system is not working is to ignore the fact that it is. Right? So, this is what I think is absolutely ridiculous about all this. Trump has repeatedly claimed that the Cuban government is near a breaking point due to the U.S. embargo, saying the island is seeing the end, and suggesting that the United States could pursue additional action soon, though he didn't indicate what it would be. Obviously, he's threatening boots on the ground military invasion, right? These comments have drawn sharp rebuke from the Cuban government, with Diaz-Canel, the president, vowing to respond with impregnable resistance to any external aggressor. Cuban Deputy Foreign Minister Carlos Fernandez de Cosio later said that the island is preparing for potential U.S. military aggression as tensions between the two countries mount. And we saw that when we were in the island. People were like, if they're going to come, I'm going to fight. I don't know what to tell you. If they're going to come, we're going to fight. Hold on just a sec. I have a volunteer thing. Sorry. Hydrate. We gotta hydrate. I just had to tell somebody I couldn't jump on a call because of the live stream. For volunteer work. Usually I do volunteer work now, but these streams are going a little late. Yeah, Yeah, there was a blackout for an hour. Everybody died. Cuba's going to collapse in 5 seconds. I mean, and look, it is fucking annoying. It's annoying not having your phone work. It's annoying not having energy. It's annoying not having internet. It's annoying not having your water pump work if you're upstairs. It is annoying. And it is an undignified thing to do to people, to make people live like that. We shouldn't have to live like that. Technology has surpassed us needing to live in those conditions. However, none of these amount to total imminent collapse. They don't. They just don't. And that is really upsetting the United States government. That's really, really upsetting them. So, basically, the people in Cuba that I talked to were like, we're going to fight. If they come and they try to fight us, we're going to fight. And we saw that awesome speech from that guy Damien, the college student, who was like, the will to resist is in our bones. That's what it means to be Cuban. Like, to be Cuban is to resist. Like, we're not going anywhere. And this is when we say, these people out here naming their kids Marx Lenin. You're not prying socialism from their hands. And when people tell you, oh, we only talk to the few people who support socialism, 90% of that island supports socialism. You got 10% of people who don't. Good luck. Good luck, right? And it's not to say that they won't be militaristically outmatched if the United States decides to do this. They will be militaristically outmatched. They might lose that battle. But the only thing I think stopping the United States is that it's deeply unpopular with the rest of the world. Even though the rest of the world is anti-communist as well. Cuba is so obviously a case of people just wanting to be left alone that if the entire UN has voted 33 years in a row to end the blockade. If the United States were to invade Cuba now, that would draw a lot of ire. That would make things a lot more difficult for the United States on the global stage. And they're already difficult. We're already losing a war with Iran, right? We already have people talking about how the United States might just nuke Iran because they're losing so badly and they don't know what else to do. All of this stuff is just going to succeed in making us deeply unpopular. Deeply, deeply, deeply unpopular. And with Europe, as we've been talking about, the EU realizing that they're not even safe from the United States aggression, this could be an act that dramatically restructures global alliances. And I think that is the only thing stopping the United States, right? One more thing, one more fuck-ass thing we do. Europe is already freaked out by us over that whole Greenland thing. This could totally shift the way world alliances fall, which is interesting, right? So why is the Trump administration targeting Cuba? We know, because they're communists. Because they're communists. And we want the land. We want it. It's pretty. It'd be a nice resort. It could be a Hawaii or a Puerto Rico. And on top of that, not only are they not giving it to us, they're communists. This is a double offense. This is a double offense to the United States government, right? This is exactly why. It's pretty. We want to be there, and they're communists. So, that's what we want. We want to own Cuba. We want to own Cuba. And this is why we're doing this. Most of the world is in favor of ending the U.S. embargo on Cuba, right? Most of the world. And it's just our allies who say no. Very rude of them not to give Cuba to Donald Trump. He wants it. He wants it. And it's literally as simple as it is. The United States has always wanted Cuba in some capacity. We don't even have to own it outright. We can have it as a neo-colony where we can do business there, where we can, do what we've been doing there under Batista. That's fine with us. We could own it outright. We could not. Whatever the case, we just need it. We need access to it. And they won't do it. And the fact that they are socialists who have been resisting our pressure for so long is embarrassing, frankly. It's embarrassing when we can't defeat socialism. And that goes into it as well. And a lot of this has to do with ego. A lot of it has to do with ego on behalf of the United States. So how likely is it? Well, this article talks about some things. Trump forcing 2 major leadership changes since retaking office, Venezuela and Iran. And 2 People for Foreign Affairs wrote, after nearly 7 decades of communist rule, there is no Cuban leader capable of bringing substantive change to the country. Too many inside government are loyal to the regime. Too many inside government are loyal to the regime. They like communism. They like it. Oh yes, Mr. Timmons says, it's not that the U.S. wants to own Cuba. We want to go back to owning Cuba. Very important. Very, very, very important designation. Remember, Cuba was considered a colony in all but name of the United States. Very, very important to add. They love the word regime. Too many inside the government are loyal to the regime. It's almost like it's not a regime and people just like their government. Who knew, right? Almost 1 million people are in their government out of an island of like 10 million people. Like 10% of the island is in the government. Of course they like the government. That's wild. And this is really why. This is what's going on. So let's look at this chart of Cuba's economy. Now, this was the special period. This is when the Soviet Union was dismantled and they were plunged into darkness. They lost their biggest trading partner. They were riding bicycles everywhere. And they really had to come together as a country. And then we saw they rebuilt. They rebuilt. So this is the decline of the pandemic that was also hard on Cuba economically. This also correlated, though, with the time, 2019, Donald Trump reintroducing the Helms-Burton Act Title III as a viable and valid and active part of that arrangement. That also corresponds with this era. They rebuilt a little. They've tapered off a little. So their economy is not where it was at its height, but it's at its around 2010 levels. We're not seeing this big drop right now. This was huge. This was massive. Should check this really fast. Okay. So this is just good for a comparative analysis of their economy today. And it still is up. It still is up. It's not great. It's got a little dip, right? But you know, it is what it is. So they're saying the U.S. blockade is hastening Cuba's economic deterioration. When the island's oil supply was cut off following Maduro's capture in January, the Cuban government was forced to enact emergency measures to address widespread fuel shortages. Even as the Trump administration has allowed companies to seek licenses to resell Venezuelan oil to Cuba's private sector, a measure that has done little to ease the island's crisis. In March, Diaz-Canel said Cuba had not received any oil shipments in 3 months. Meanwhile, Cuba's economy remains controlled by the GAESA, which is the military-controlled business conglomerate that oversees much of the island's tourism, finance, retail, and imports to the government. The government, they're just making it sound weirder than it is, right? So they have $18 billion in dollar-denominated assets, and $14.5 billion of that is being held in bank accounts or financial institutions, so cash. So there have been, they point out, rare public protests. There was a protest. This was one protest, and they've really milked it. They attacked the Communist Party in a rare riot over blackouts. Everyone's saying it's rare. Why? Because people like their government. People like their government. They don't really protest that much. Now, these people did. This group of people lit the Communist Party building on fire. Now, the Communist Party, I'm just going to say this. This is speculation. I'm speculating wildly. There's no proof of this. The Communist Party is not the government. And anybody in Cuba knows that. So, why, out of nowhere, suddenly, do you think there might be a protest in Cuba that targets the Communist Party, not the government, and burns it, lights it on fire, of just a handful of people in the middle of the night? Just a few people. It was not very many people. It was like 14 people or something. Yeah. It sounds very much like it was done for the Americans, optically. Everybody's saying Ned, American-funded protest. Yeah. It read very, very Ned-coded to me as well. It read very, very CIA-coded to me as well. And this is not that conspiratorial when you consider Operation Mongoose. The CIA has been operating in Cuba massively going back decades. We have sponsored such attempts over and over and over again. We talked about this before about USAID. USAID, we talked about it at the top of the stream. They actually created a whole fake Twitter called Zunzuneo in Cuba and tried to start a protest like this. We are paying people there left and right to do acts of resistance against the government. We know this throughout history. So when I heard this, I was like, the Communist Party's building on fire. That's optics, baby. And that's optics for Americans who don't understand how the Cuban government works. Right? Right. So that's what was going on there, which I think is interesting. And it was just the one. It's just the one, and it was a handful of people. Let's see if we can see the people count on this, the number of people. And they've really milked it in the U.S. news. They've really milked it in the U.S. news. People throwing rocks to the building as people shouted liberty in the background. Also, Cuba Libre, like that liberty thing, like Libre, whatever, that is very, like Miami phrasing, right? It's very Miami phrasing as well, which I think is important to note. So let's take a look. They didn't even say the number of people. Oh, here we go. What initially began peacefully and after an exchange with local authorities turned into active vandalism against the headquarters of the Municipal Party Committee, said this paper. So it wasn't very many people. A smaller group of people stoned the entrance of the building and started a fire in the street with furniture from the reception area. So all we know is that it's a small group of people. So again, this could be like 5-10 people for all we know, right? And we're going to talk about the effects that the blockade has had on the morale of the Cuban people and on their thoughts about socialism and communism as well. Yeah. Cuba is already free. Exactly. So we're really trying here. We're really, really trying here to get these people to abandon their government and to do what we want. It's not really working. It's not really working. Russia has affirmed support for Cuba. We know. Moscow is sending shipments of oil to Cuba despite U.S. sanctions prohibiting Russian oil transactions involving the island. A Russian oil tanker arrived in Cuba 2 days ago now, March 30th. And Trump told reporters he had no problem with the oil delivery. He has to. He just got cucked. He just got cucked live. Donald Trump got cucked live. So what's he have to do? He has to be like, I was in on it. I was fine with that. Like, that man is so transparent. Like, what do you mean you had no problem with the oil's delivery? And this guy, you totally understand him as like a creature of ego. I feel like anybody who's ever done sex work understands Donald Trump so well. He's like, that's fine. Those are my friends. Russia's my friends. We're friends. It's cool. We're cool with it. We planned that actually ahead of time. Yeah, I was fine with that. Don't worry. Yeah, he totally got cucked, and he had to pretend like he didn't. I mean, that's really what's going on here. And you can understand all of his motives by remembering the kind of personality he has in that way, right? That's pretty funny. So, okay. That's what's up with this. Now, who does trade with Cuba and what do they trade? Let's talk about that because it's not everything. So what's actually able to get through here? Let's do just like a little bit of an understanding of it. This is, the OEC website for Cuba. And they are 96 in technology trade out of 96. They're not doing great. They are economically weakened, right? They have these very, very low numbers. Exports per capita, their ranking is 188 out of 209. So it really limits what they're able to export, what they're able to import. Their imports are ranked 150th out of 226 different countries. Imports per capita, even worse, 180 out of 209. So these are low numbers. These are very, very low numbers for what they can import and export because of, obviously, their size, for sure. But then we look at the per capita, and then we get a better understanding. This is based on their size, and it's still low, and it's because of the blockade, right? That is because of it. So, in 2024, Cuba was the number 158 out of 226 in total exports. Remember, that's not per capita, though. The top exports of Cuba, what are they exporting to the world? Rolled tobacco, cigars, zinc ore, nickel, hard liquor, rum, Cuban rum, and precious metals. The top destinations were China, Spain, Germany, Macau, and Switzerland. So this is who's doing the most of their trade. So people are like, why doesn't China just make... China's doing everything it can, but China's, a member of the world just like any other country. They have to contend with the United States doing this as well. Imports. What are they importing? They're importing mostly poultry meat, beer, cars, rice, and telephones. Those are their biggest imports. And usually they're from Spain, China, the United States, Brazil, and Italy. So they still are able to import some things from the United States, but they have to pass through all of those hoops, basically, that were laid out, right, by the U.S. government. So it's a lot of food stuff. And U.S. trade with Cuba, speaking more to that, like what does U.S. trade with Cuba look like? We are still doing business with Cuba despite this. Despite all of this, we're still doing business with Cuba, and we are the ones giving them mostly poultry and pork and dairy. It's a lot of food. So really, food is the only thing that is really safe for us to export per these laws and for these rules, and this is what we are giving them. So they also have food on the island, and this is why we say they don't really have food security issues in terms of the quantity of food they can eat. It's just certain types of food that are hard for them to get, right? So that's what's going on there. So we're trying to pressure the whole world to stop trading with Cuba. Meanwhile, we're trading with Cuba. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Now, we want to talk about the Weapons Wednesday element of it all, right? Sanctions as a weapon. And I know this is kind of a flaw, but next week we'll go back to more explodey boom weapons. But sanctions are a weapon. It is a tool of hybrid warfare, and it does kill people. And we really, really, really need to remember this, right? So I have this quote here from this document we're going to look at. Somebody mentioned this at the top of the stream, and they were correct. Unilateral sanctions, just in general, are associated with an annual toll of 564,258 deaths per year, similar to the global mortality burden associated with armed conflict. So when we say sanctions kill people, not just in Cuba, this is in the world, they do. They kill over 500,000 people every single year. And that is similar to armed conflict. This is warfare. This is warfare, right? So, effects of international sanctions on age-specific mortality talks about this. This is where we get this info from, and I'll make you guys a tiny URL for this so you can see. But notice how it says age-specific. We're going to get into that, and it's actually quite sad that people who are affected by this the worst. And again, Cuba does pretty well despite these sanctions, but when the United States lobbies the UN for global sanctions, when we talk about the DPRK, when we talk about embargo, the blockade against the DPRK, when we talk about what we're doing here just in the United States and Cuba, what is the goal? The goal is to kill people. That is the goal. Our goal is to kill people, right? Why else would we be doing it? Why else would we be doing it if we weren't going to kill people? And we know we kill people. Sanctions kill over 500,000 people every single year. On average, worth noting, sanctions are associated with a decrease in life expectancy from 1.2 to 1.4 years during UN sanctions. So if the UN issues sanctions against a country, it takes on average 1.5 years off of the lifespan of the people in that country. And I'm going to show you guys this as well. So this is this. This is from this paper. I'll get you guys a tiny URL for this as well, if you would like. But we have a direct quote here that I can copy and paste in here. And we'll find it. Okay, here we go. So it's on page 4 of this. On average, sanctions are associated with a decrease in life expectancy by about 1.2 to 1.4 years during an episode of UN sanctions. And the corresponding decrease of around half a year under US sanctions is significantly smaller. So the United States doing sanctions on its own takes half a year off. Yeah, and Cuba's life expectancy, depending on your source, is the same as or better than the United States, despite all that. Despite all that. So that is really, I think, a good way to frame this. We are killing people in Cuba. And despite us killing people in Cuba, they are still outperforming us on several metrics, right? It's very, very interesting. And yes, sometimes sanctions are used as a form of genocide. They are used sometimes to do ethnic cleansing. So let me get you guys a tiny URL on this, so you can have access to this if you want to take a look at it later on your own time and really dig through this data. But no, we kill people. That is why we do this. So I like to remember this rhetorically to tell people, like, UN sanctions take 1.5 years on average off the lifespan of every person in the country affected. Every average person. So you're a person in Cuba, US sanctions, 0.5 year off your lifespan from that alone, right? And it's very, very important for us to remember. Now, the reason why they talk about children is that children are disproportionately affected by it. Little kids, right? Mortality effects for children younger than 5, individuals aged 60 to 80 years, these are the high points. The elderly and children are who are most affected by this. And again, we estimated that unilateral sanctions were associated with an annual toll of over 500,000 deaths, similar to the global mortality burden associated with armed conflict. So sanctions are waging all the wars in the world every single day. We should make a Victims of Capitalism book, because it's fucking bullshit. Because these people are out here quoting this debunked shit, victims of communism, blah, 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 and it's all a bunch of fucking Nazis. Meanwhile, over 500,000 people are dying around the world every single year from capitalist sanctions alone. Here in the United States, last time we checked, 800,000 people were dying every single year, according to the Columbia Mayo School of Public Health, based on inequality and poverty-related issues alone. That's just in the United States. So we got 1 million people dying in the United States from capitalism every year. We got 500,000 people dying around the world from capitalist sanctions every single year. There's 1.5 million people dying just from those two factors alone every single year from capitalism. It's absolutely wild. It would be almost the entirety of the contemporary global population. Yes, exactly. It's absolutely horrific what we do. And yeah, Venezuela was another victim of these types of sanctions. So we've got an article here we're going to read. It's short, and it's Immoral and Indefensible. Study reveals deadly consequences of U.S. sanctions. This is by Brett Wilkins. One of the study's authors says it is well past time that the U.S., EU, and other powerful actors in the international community seriously reconsider this cruel and often counterproductive mechanism. And this is about Cuba in particular, this image, but it's in general. So a study published last week, the date on this is 2025, so it's old. In the British medical journal, The Lancet Global Health revealed that the unilateral economic sanctions caused more than 500,000 excess deaths annually. That's what we just looked at, prompting renewed calls for the United States to end its use of this as a form of collective punishment that claims roughly as many lives as all of the world's current wars combined. Right? Like, screenshot that one, right? Our sanctions cause as much death as all of the world's current wars combined. And these are the same people who want to talk to you, right, about Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine. They don't understand what's going on in Ukraine. Like, they won't talk to you about the effects of the sanctions in Venezuela or Cuba or the DPRK. It's horrible. Oh, I'm glad I'm keeping awake. I felt like my energy is kind of low. I feel like I might be losing people, right? The study, authored by Francisco Rodriguez. Oh, yeah, let me get you guys this link. Maybe this is too dense to do for a live stream. Maybe it's not as exciting as normal. But, you know, I think this is important information for us to have. Especially if you want to combat those people that are like, communism kills all these people. You'd be like, first of all, do not Black Book of Communism me. Alright? Do not give me that shit. I'm not going to stand for that. It's not real. But second of all, 1.5 million people die just in the United States from capitalism and from sanctions. Every single year. That's like good info for us to have handy, to be able to say. That is good, rhetorical, strong, make you think information. Right? Oh, you wrapped? Okay, yay, garlic fits. Yay, okay, I'm glad. All right. So the study, authored by Francisco Rodriguez, Silvio Rendon, and Mark Weisbrot for the Center of Economic and Policy Research, is the first, and this is what I think Virgo shared the actual study in the chat, the CEPR study, is the first to examine the effects of sanctions on age-specific mortality rates in cross-country panel data using methods designed to address causal identification and observational data. Studying the effects of sanctions on 152 countries between 1971 and 2022, the researchers showed a significant causal association between sanctions and increased mortality, with the strongest effects for unilateral, economic, and U.S. sanctions. We estimate that unilateral sanctions were associated with an annual total of 564,258 deaths, the study's authors noted, similar to the global mortality burden associated with armed conflict. Weisbrot, CEPR's co-director, said in a statement, "It is immoral and indefensible that such a lethal form of collective punishment continues to be used, let alone that it has been steadily expanded over the years. And sanctions are widely misunderstood as being less lethal, almost non-violent policy alternatives to military force." And this is what's really important, right? People think sanctions are just, that's boring, that's just money. It's not. It's murder. It's mass fucking murder. Sanctions are mass fucking murder. So think about it this way. You're the United States government. You know sanctions are mass murder. You know that. It's your trump card in your back pocket. No pun intended. You pull that out whenever you want to kill a bunch of people with just like a signature on a piece of paper, a new policy, just a little, yeah. Whenever you want to kill a bunch of people in a targeted country, you know you do that. You can just do that. It's so easy. And then you look at Cuba, tiny little Cuba, no resources to its name. You look at it and you go, I want to kill all those people. Give me a piece of paper. Sign, boop, kill him. And Cuba's like, this is really annoying, but we're not dying. So, okay, whatever. How much does that piss you off? How much does that piss you off if you're the United States? Yeah, the funniest thing you read in the comment section, first time chat, was that Russia was committing genocide in Ukraine. I know. And Russia and Ukraine, for the record, have both lobbied genocide claims against each other. And they've been dismissed, and the ICJ is sorting through. It's like this whole thing. They're both like genocide at each other. This happens a lot in conflict. This happened with the Bosnian Muslims and the Serbs in former Yugoslavia as well. This will happen a lot in conflicts, you'll see this. But people really do not understand how mortality works, and like massive threats to mortality on a wide institutional scale. So, Raccoon Psyop, I have a Cuba question. Did you learn about Cuba's addiction treatment or see any methadone clinics there? It's illegal to bring methadone, even as a prescription under any circumstances, as a tourist. And that's used to then talk about how medicated assisted treatment doesn't exist in Cuba. But I've never seen a source for supporting that. But unfortunately, I couldn't find one debunking it either. I didn't ask specifically about methadone. I would guess that's something they probably don't have access to because it is so specific, right? That would make sense to me that they don't have access to it, but who knows? They do also have awesome development. Let me see if I can chat if I can search that really fast. I mean, the Cuban medical system surprises me all the time. Oh no, Mark Cuban apparently backed a methadone startup. So now it's just like, Mark Cuban's methadone. The guy from like Shark Tank or something? I'm like, no, Mark. Get rid of Mark. Why are you showing me this? Oh, here we go. We have something. Approaches to substance abuse. They're not saying anything about methadone in particular. I'm not sure. I wonder if we can find something like that. That'd be interesting. Hi, Kate Moose. We talked about, a little bit about addiction, but I'm not sure about methadone specifically. That might be something that takes a little deeper dive because of Mark Cuban's existence, unfortunately. And if you guys don't know who Mark Cuban is, he's this man. This man is ruining our ability to search for this in real time. That's not Mark Cuban. I kind of wish that was Mark Cuban, though. Aesthetically, that's a stronger look to me. Chopped. Was he in Brooklyn 99? Brooklyn 99, I guess is what it's called. It's crazy. So interesting. All right, so this quote here: sanctions are widely misunderstood as being less lethal, almost non-violent, but they're not. They're deadly. And this is also, you have to understand why the United States fucking hates Cuba so much. The researchers found that children younger than 5 years old made up 51% of all sanctions deaths during the 3-decade study period. We're killing children. We are killing children with sanctions. More than 3/4 of all sanctions deaths between 1971 and 2022 were children under the age of 15 or people over the age of 60. We are killing children and the elderly. It's horrible. It's horrible. I don't think he's actually Cuban, Mark Cuban. No, I did do negative Mark and it didn't work very well. But yeah, no, somebody said, Kate Moose says, Calty Moose, sorry, that USA's favorite official function is murdering children. And it's so true. It's so true. What we want to do is kill children every way we can. We just want to kill children. It's so barbaric. It's horrible. It's horrible. The disabled, the elderly, yes, anybody vulnerable. The study also noted the repeated failure of U.S. sanctions to deliver policy goals like regime change, and we don't even get what we want from it. It doesn't even work. However, such measures have caused economies to collapse, harming everyday people far more than the ostensibly targeted leaders who have the power and resources to shield themselves from the worst effects of sanctions. This isn't super pertinent in Cuba. Miguel Diaz-Canel actually made a joke about this when we saw him speak. He was like, we don't have rich people here. Like, you know, so it's different. Like, I'm not rich. We don't have rich people. And it's true, they don't have rich people. The closest they have to rich people is like maybe that insane grandson of Fidel Castro. Have you guys seen this guy? He's like the Paris Hilton of the island. But he's got a bunch of wealthy connections in Miami. That's why. Do you guys know who this guy is? Everyone's like obsessed with him. Yeah, we have the child killer. Yeah. Yeah, this guy's fucking kook balls. This dude. He's like, yeah. Everybody in Cuba wants to be a capitalist. They don't. He's part of the 10%. He's insane. He is like a Paris Hilton figure. Like, he wants to be famous. Like, he wants to be reality TV famous in Cuba. Also chopped. They don't have good looks. Compare this look to the Cuban literacy teachers in the 1960s, their outfits. I'm just saying. Make the revolution irresistible. We have better outfits. So yeah, he owns a nightclub. He owns a private business in Cuba that he bought for $55,000. He's also amassed over $150,000 on Instagram with outrageous and often bizarre antics that appear like an audition for an inevitable reality show. He's a weirdo. What exactly is the difference between sanctions, blockades, and embargoes? So a blockade is just a common term. We did talk about this, but it's fine. A blockade is just like a common term used to describe any pattern of economic warfare that effectively isolates and alienates a country. A sanction is usually something like targeted towards individuals in a country that have power, but it usually has cascading effects that will do things like, you know, you don't have access to your bank accounts, or this is frozen assets, or whatever. And an embargo would be more like a trade restriction. right? Like, you can't trade this thing. This is embargoed from you. I think that's the easiest way to think about it. Oh, yeah, this is so sad. They said, think 100 years of solitude means keeping up with the Kardashians. So, Sandro, unlike the rest of his family, the rest of the Castro family, Sandro openly seeks out fame and notoriety, even daring to troll the island's communist-run government. He is like, I'm trying to make people happy. He wants to be a performer. He wants to be an actor. This guy is insane. Castro's posts offer a rare peek into a life of privilege unimaginable to most Cubans. So, and again, Miguel Diaz-Canel is like, we don't have rich people. This guy is rich, Cuba rich. He's Cuba rich. He's not like a millionaire, but he's like, $1 US in Cuba goes very, very, very far. So he owns this nightclub worth $55,000, and he has Miami connections. So this is the closest thing you get to like a rich guy there, right? So a recent Instagram video featured an actor with a bad wig pretending to be Donald Trump arriving on Castro's doorstep and attempting to buy Cuba from him. We can do business because you're a showman and a businessman like me, the fake Donald Trump tells the real Castro. You want to buy what? Castro responds, chill out. Poking fun at Trump's threat to take over Cuba if the country's worsening economic crisis seemed tone deaf, if not dangerous, in a nation that has warned its citizens they need to prepare for war. It's hard to imagine anyone not named Castro getting away with a similar stunt. But Sandro Castro says he's just like other Cubans. And he's fed up. Yes, this is him. This is the pro-capitalist grandson. But there's like 6 grandkids. This one's just a kookball. This guy's just like an insane, like he's Cuba's Paris Hilton. He wants a reality TV show. He wants to be rich. He wants to be famous. He's like an insane person. So he was wearing designer sunglasses. And he's like, the outrage gets the likes. That's how you get the likes. So this is what Cuba rich looks like. And it's nice, but it's not what we would consider rich here, you know? So, but he wants to be rich. That you saw his room. You just saw his bedroom, right? Yeah, fail son. There's always a failed kid. There's always some fail. There's always some idiot child, right? He's got the ring light in the corner. He's a real awkward kind of guy here. Yet your prime minister has 57 houses. No, this is the rich guy in Cuba. This is the closest thing they have. So Castro says, I'm not Dubai rich. My family does not own mansions or yachts. And he says he doesn't have gas to put in his car. But he's doing okay for himself. He is a rare figure in Cuba. But yeah, he's like, no. Everybody wants to be a capitalist in Cuba. No, just you, buddy. Just fucking you, buddy. The outrage, he says, gets the likes. And he says, Ted Henkin, a sociology and anthropology professor, says he's trading on hate me. The Kardashians and Paris Hilton and him. They're also trading on this envy or look at my fabulous lifestyle. You can't look away. The outrage gets the likes, the followers. Castro is not a millionaire, and he says he bought a nightclub on the main avenue of Havana that cost him $50,000. And he says, my name is my name. I'm proud of it. And then this is my favorite part. During the interview, Castro wondered out loud how he could get a visa to the U.S. to visit friends in Miami. So he's doing this interview with CNN, and he wants to go to Miami and break the rules. And he's like, wow, I wonder if there's any way someone like me could go to Miami. I wonder. He's clearly trying to get the people in the interview to find a special way to get him to Miami. Like, he's a kookball, this guy. He's absolutely wild. This is the Cuban version of an edgy teen. Yeah, exactly. And he says the majority of Cubans want to be capitalists. But no. So Sandro Castro is one of the grandsons of Fidel Castro and Dalia Soto del Valle, a school teacher from the center of the island who quietly lived with the Cuban leader for decades. The couple had 5 sons together: Alexis, Alex, Alejandro, Antonio, and Angel. Fidel Castro, wanting to protect his family's privacy, never publicly disclosed them. Alexis Castro Soto del Valle, Sandro's father and a telecommunications engineer, also dabbled in social media. He posted on X memories of his childhood in the famous family. Blah, blah, blah. In 2024, he said he was taking a digital detox. He stopped posting on X. And Sandro was on the phone with his father preparing talking points when CNN arrived to speak with him. He says that his family often asks him to remove controversial posts where he mocks blackouts and fuel shortages. I'm just kidding around, he said. He told CNN he wants to produce his own beer and buy more nightclubs and cars. This guy wants to be a capitalist, but is frustrated by the red tape that surrounds all commerce in Cuba, as the result of the system his grandfather put in place. It's the voices in chat, exactly. So, worth noting though, remember, Castro's family were capitalists, right? When we talked about the history of the revolution, his family were capitalists. They had their own little area they called Castro Town that was all businesses they owned. So this guy's actually following not in grandpa's footsteps, but in great-grandpa's footsteps, certainly, right? There is a part of the family that is capitalist. So this is not surprising if you know anything about Castro's family, right? So this is the kook ball that they're parading around to be like, it means something. It doesn't mean something. Meanwhile, 3/4 of all sanctions, deaths, in a 30-year period affected children under 15 and people over the age of 60. This is the system that guy wants. That guy wants to own more nightclubs, and he doesn't care how many children have to die to make it happen. This dumb dude in capitalism would be a nobody proletariat. Yeah, he'd be like a weird, like you have one of those friends who gets a job and thinks they know how to do the job better than everybody there, even though they don't have work experience, and then they start complaining to everybody and want to take meetings with the high up managers because they've got ideas, and then they just get fired because it turns out they don't have good ideas and they just don't do their work. You know, that guy, that's like a trope of a guy, right? I think we've all met a guy like that. That's it. Yes, the beige Cuban. Yeah, so these guys do exist, and they can critique the government. They can talk to you. They can tell you this, right? All the time. It's this idea that it's illegal to critique the government, or you can't critique the government. That's why it seems like everybody there wants communism. No, they literally are going on the news critiquing the government. They're telling us, yeah, we want capitalism. There's just not that many of them, and it's a massive fucking code from these people who want to believe communism is evil, right? Anglo's family is also capitalist, proving there's always hope for future generations. Exactly. So, back to the study, it noted the repeated failure of U.S. sanctions to deliver policy goals like regime change. However, such measures have caused economies to collapse, right? Sanctions often fail to achieve their stated objectives and instead only punish the civilian populations of the targeted countries, said Rodriguez. It's well past time that the U.S. and the European Union and other powerful actors in the international community seriously reconsider this cruel and counterproductive mechanism. For 6 decades, the U.S. has imposed a crippling economic embargo on Cuba that has adversely affected all sectors of the socialist island's economy and severely limited Cubans' access to basic necessities, including food, fuel, and medicines. Now again, this doesn't mean that they don't have anything to eat. They just don't have a good variety of foods. They don't have things they want. Things they should be able to get if they want, right? That's important for all of us to know. Oh, I have more tea still. It doesn't mean they don't have any medicine, but it means over-the-counter medications are way more difficult for them to get than they should be. The Cuban government claims the blockade cost the country, its economy, nearly $5 billion in just one 11-month period alone from 2022 to 2023. United Nations members have perennially and overwhelmingly condemned the embargo. In Venezuela, as many as 40,000 people died in 2017 to 2018 due to U.S. sanctions, CEPR researchers found. Now, we don't have numbers like that for Cuba because they do such a good job. It's wild how good of a job they do. But this is what the United States is trying to do to them, certainly. And this is what the United States does to other countries. Bye, Scouts Marxists. Yeah, it's TikTok's getting real bad over there. This is nice, though, right? It's nice to be around normal people. This is what I always tell people, too. It's like, you spend a couple days on TikTok, you're like, oh my god, the masses are buffoons. And then you go to, any left-wing space, and you're like, oh, thank god I'm normal. Oh, thank god. Oh, my precious echo chamber. I need it. It's therapy at this point. It's nice. So, JFK claimed, a confidant, of former President JFK claimed that he sought to unleash the terrors of the earth on Cuba following Fidel Castro's successful overthrow of a U.S.-backed dictatorship, because Castro was high on his list of emotions, right? Never take blame for anything we can blame the CIA for. Castro was high on his list of emotions. This is emotional for the United States. When we say it's embarrassing, it's upsetting, it pisses the government off, we mean that. It's emotional. The United States government looks at Cuba not dying. How dare they? How dare they not die? We've done all the things that are supposed to make them die. And they're not dying, but they're pretty annoyed that they can't import food and they have to ride bicycles. The indignity of this is upsetting. It is emotional for us. It is insulting to us. We are reacting emotionally, right? While the new study found no statistical evidence of an effect for UN sanctions, It's not true. We've seen other studies, right? This other one revealed that as many as 576,000 Iraqi children died prematurely as a result of sanctions imposed by the UN Security Council. We know that. Discussions, and that's again, 500,000 children in Iraq died from sanctions from the UN. And we've seen the other study that shows 1.5 years are taken off the lifespan of the average person there. Avril Cringe, your granddad, uncle, mega Marxist-Leninist, went to Cuba the first time they harvested sugarcane under communism, drank mate with Che, had a son that was named Ernesto Che, grew up to be a lame-ass liberal. It happens. It happens to the best of us. Not us, though, chat. Not us. It happens to other people. Not us. So discussions in the 1990s on the effects of child mortality of sanctions in Iraq strongly influenced policy debates and were one of the main drivers of the subsequent redesign of the sanctions of the government of Saddam Hussein. So that's what this little assessment is for us to note. Damn it, Ernesto! Now, younger people and their frustrations. So I want to talk to you about the types of people who the sanctions are working on, who are ideologically weakened. So we're going to revisit again the goals stated in the Mallory Memorandum. Remember that? This guy? These things? What is their goals? Their goals are to alienate internal support through disenchantment and disaffection based on economic dissatisfaction and hardship. This is what the United States is trying to do with these sanctions. They want to make it so that the people turn on the government. They want to alienate internal support. Make it so the people internally do not support their government, turn on their government, because they are so dissatisfied with economic issues and hardships they encounter. That's what the goals are, right? Yeah, let me send this. Okay, there we go. So, is this working? On most people, no. On most people, no. It just makes them hate the United States and love socialism and be like, holy shit, everything Castro said was right. Everything we thought was right. Okay? Everything Jose Marti said was right, who wasn't even a Marxist, but was talking about the need for Cuba to be independent from the United States. But for some people, this has worked. And I'm not going to lie to you and pretend like it hasn't. We talked to a lot of people when we were in Cuba. I talked to a lot of people. Some of them were like, I'm not even an ideologue. I don't even care about capitalism that much. But I want the blockade to end because it's annoying. And if this is what gets the blockade to end, fuck it. Who cares? How bad could it be? It's kind of the vibe of a lot of people on the island. Not most of them, but people. 10% probably of the island, right? 1 in 10 people. That's significant. That's a significant number of people. And this number is 10%. This comes from their elections. So to participate in their elections are direct. You don't have to be a member of a communist party. It's a nonpartisan system, which ironically enough is what the founding fathers of the United States imagined for us. They imagined we wouldn't have political parties at all. Then the Democrats and Republicans hijacked everything and told you if you don't vote blue no matter who, a pack of crazed hyenas is going to, emerge from a cave and eat your firstborn child in front of you, or something is going to happen like that. And then now all of a sudden people are invested in party politics in the United States. That was never supposed to be the function of the United States government. That's not the function of how electoral politics work in Cuba. They don't have a party system. So there are members of the Communist Party. You don't have to be a member of the Communist Party to run for office. It doesn't matter what. And you don't run as a representative of the Communist Party. You just run as yourself. So 10% of elected officials in the assembly are not members of the Communist Party. They are just unaffiliated. They're just normal people. They're not communists, right? So we know that roughly 10% of the island is not communist. 90%, those are good numbers though. Those are good numbers. That's an A. They got an A in communism over there in Cuba. So this is why people freak out so much. This is why you see people be like, well, I talked to somebody and they hate it. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did talk to somebody who hated it. Yeah, because people aren't monolith, right? And then they're like, well, why is everybody you're talking to loving it? They must be government plants. No, babe, that's just most people. That's just most people. Most people just like it. But what about the people who don't? Let's take a look at that. Let's talk about that. There is a group of people on the island for whom 0.6 is working. They do feel alienated from supporting their government. They have turned against their government because they are so dissatisfied with economic hardship that they're experiencing as a result of the blockade, right? Those people do exist. There's not a lot of them, but they're there. And mostly, they're young people. Now, if anybody has studied the time period where the USSR was dismantled, this isn't surprising to you that it's young people who turn on communism first. We know this. This is why when we talk about Stalin, we talk about how good Stalin was at keeping young people aware of the revolution, reminding them the revolution was ongoing, making the revolution part of their day-to-day function, making education about the revolution a massive part of their school system. When we look at China, they've done that as well. They've maintained the spirit of the revolution. They've taught their kids about the revolution. That is so, so, so important. And in Cuba, they've done that too. That's why only 10% of people there are like, I'm not so committed to this communism thing, right? So, what though is the makeup of the people who tend to change their mind? It is young people, and this is true in any place that experiences communism. So we're going to take a look about this kind of trend generally in communism, and we're going to look at it through the lens of the USSR, because we have data on that's been declassified because the USSR no longer exists. So our government declassified the data. So we're going to take a look at the dismantling of the USSR and who was less likely in that period to be enthusiastic about communism. Right? And what the CIA called this in a declassified document here is the Gorbachev generation. We discussed the characteristics of the Gorbachev generation and their likely impact on policymaking. We tried to distinguish between characteristics we attribute to Gorbachev, who was later, right, and those that are generally shared by his generation. We came up with a list of several characteristics that appear to describe Gorbachev's generation in comparison to Brezhnev's. Here we go, sorry. More secure and self-confident. They have grown up in a period of major Soviet successes and they feel their security is less threatened. Right? They didn't experience the revolution. They didn't experience the fight. They've grown up in relative stability. In Cuba, while they are dealing with the blockade, they don't know what it's like to fight capitalism. They don't know what it's like to fight imperialism. Younger people. These are younger people. They didn't have to fight. So they feel more secure and comfortable. They're able to notice the inconveniences a little bit more because they don't have anything really to compare it to more tangible or more disturbing. The next is more pragmatic. They're less bound by traditional ideological considerations and more willing to find ideological justifications for the policies they want to pursue. This is true in Cuba as well. They see Cardi B on TV. They're like, I like Cardi B. I want to wear Cardi B's clothes. Who cares if it's ideologically pure communism or not? I want Cardi B's clothes. That's fine. This is also true there. One of Kim Jong-il's criticisms of the USSR and Eastern Bloc countries is that they didn't push for ideological education, and that's why the DPRK seems so ideologically minded. Kubashi says, yes, agree. And this is why we talk about Stalin. Stalin did push for that up until a point, and then when Stalin went away, it all disappeared. China does push for that. The DPRK does push for that, and it is an essential part of your revolution. Just like you need nukes, you need the ideological framework. You need the ideological training in your children, or you will lose your revolution, just as we've seen that happen in the USSR, and as we see that happen with young people everywhere. Right? Okay, I'll send this link. Hold on. 1 second. Okay, so the Gorbachev generation in the USSR was more materialistic. We see this in Cuba too. They're less committed to the egalitarianism and equal treatment for all and aspire to a higher standard of living just for themselves. Right? Look at Fidel Castro's kookball's fucking son. Is he not that? He's that. And that's what we see with a lot of young people. They're more individualistic. They're more selfish. Why? Because you haven't put enough emphasis on that ideological training. Now, again, in Cuba, this is rare. This is a lot more rare than it was in the USSR. The USSR is still pretty rare. It's about half as rare as that in Cuba. So they have done a good job training. But this is just a thing that happens with young people. Teenagers who didn't have to fight for their liberation from capitalism, they grow up not understanding what they're up against, what the alternative could be, right? They don't know how bad capitalism is. So it's easier for them to get taken in by the capitalism sales points, right? And that's important for us to remember. Less committed to the status quo. They're less responsible for current policies, and because of that, they're more willing to reject them if they don't like them. And higher standards. They tend to measure Soviet performance against world standards, not the hard times of the post-revolutionary period. This is the same in Cuba. They tend not to look at Cuba and what Cuba had going on before the revolution, but instead they tend to look at Cuba and compare it to the United States. Or not even the United States, because they don't know the reality of the United States. Compare it to the version of the United States they see in movies and on TV. Right? Halley's Rainbow Library. This is why history and acreage history is important to folks. So children understand shape. Yes, exactly. Accurate history. Yes. So true. It is. And this, when I read this, I'm just like, that's what's happening. When you meet young people in Cuba who are like, they fit all these categories. And this is textbook. This is what happens when a revolution, a socialist revolution, advances to the point where people are coming into being who did not experience life before that revolution, who are very far removed, whose parents didn't maybe even experience life before that revolution. They're very far removed from the revolution. They don't know how bad capitalism can be. And chat, you guys know my favorite joke about this? You know my favorite joke about this, right? Capitalism did what communism could not, made communism look good. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about that as well. That's important. So, we're going to read an excerpt from Black Shirts and Reds, where Parenti talks about this in particular, which I quite like. Romanticizing capitalism is the section we're going to read. And I have a PDF of the book here, and we're going to do a little reading of it here. And we're going to read the first 2 pages. Let me see. Okay, yeah. Here we go. So this is from Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. In 1990, in Washington, D.C., the Hungarian ambassador held a press conference to announce that his country was discarding its socialist system because it did not work. When I asked why it did not work, he said, "I don't know." Here was someone who confessed that he had no understanding of the deficiencies of his country's socioeconomic process, even though he was one of those in charge of that process. Leaders who talk only to each other are soon out of touch with reality. The policymakers of these communist states showed a surprisingly un-Marxist understanding of the problems they faced. There were denunciations and admonitions aplenty, but admonishments, I guess is what I would usually say. Admonitions, aplenty. I've never used that word. I always say admonishments, so I don't know if that's right or not. But little systemic analysis of why and how things had come to such an impasse. Instead, there was much admiration for what was taken to be Western capitalist know-how, and remarkably little understanding of the uglier side of capitalism and how it impacted upon the world. In the USSR, glasnost, the use of critical debate to invite innovation and reform, opened Soviet media and to Western penetration, and accelerated the very dissatisfaction it was intended to rectify. Leaders in Poland and Hungary, and eventually the Soviet Union and other European communist nations, decided to open their economies to Western investment during the late 1980s. It was anticipated that state ownership would exist on equal terms with cooperatives, foreign investors, domestic private entrepreneurs. In fact, the whole state economy was put at risk and eventually undermined. Communist leaders had even less understanding of the capitalist system than of their own. Most people living under socialism had little understanding of capitalism in practice. Really hit that home. That is true. Most people living under socialism have little understanding of capitalism in practice. What's the story I've told a million times? I was talking to the college kid, and he was saying that he thought switching to capitalism might be advantageous over socialism in Cuba, because sometimes he goes to the doctor for his prescriptions for a fever, and then he goes to the pharmacy to pick up his prescriptions, and they don't have it. And then I told him I would never go to the doctor for a fever under capitalism because I cannot afford that doctor's visit, and that I've only been to the doctor 5 times in my entire life. And he looked horrified. I scared him straight, I think. So this is what we're talking about. People living under socialism do not understand how bad capitalism is. They cannot even imagine how bad capitalism is, right? Workers interviewed in Poland believed if their factory were to be closed down in the transition to the free market, quote, the state will find us some other work. They thought they would have it both ways. In the Soviet Union, many who argued for privatization also expected the government to continue providing them with collective benefits and subsidies. One skeptical farmer got it right. Some people want to be capitalists for themselves, but expect socialism to keep serving them. Reality sometimes hit home. In 1990, during the glasnost period, when the Soviet government announced that the price of newsprint would be raised 300% to make it commensurate with the actual cost, a new pro-capitalist publication complained bitterly. They were angry that state socialism would no longer subsidize their denunciations of state socialism. They were being subjected to the same free market realities they so enthusiastically advocated for like everyone else, and they did not like it. Or for everyone else, not like everyone else. Not everyone romanticized capitalism. Many of the Soviet and Eastern European immigrants who had migrated to the United States during the 70s and 80s complained about this country's poor social services, crime, harsh work conditions, lack of communitarian spirit, vulgar electoral campaigns, inferior educational standards, and the astonishing ignorance that Americans had about history. They discovered they could no longer leave their jobs during the day to go shopping, that their employers provided no company doctor when they fell ill on the job, that they were subject to severe reprimands when tardy, that they could not walk the streets and parks late at night without fear, that they might not be able to afford medical services for their family or college tuition for their children, and that they had no guarantee of a job and might experience unemployment at any time. Among those who never immigrated were some of those who did not harbor illusions about capitalism. In fact, numerous workers, peasants, and elderly were fearful of the changes ahead and not entirely sold on the free market mythology. A 1989 survey in Czechoslovakia found that 47% wanted their economy to remain state-controlled, 43% wanted a mixed economy, and only 3% said they favored capitalism. In May of 1991, a survey of Russians by a polling organization from the United States found that 54% chose some form of socialism and only 20% wanted a free market economy like the United States or Germany. Another 27% elected for, quote, a modified form of capitalism, like in Sweden. So, this is kind of what they're talking about that's relevant here to how we're thinking about Cuba, right? This is Michael Parenti, obviously, black shirts and reds. And this is exactly what's going on there. The same applies to Cuba. When we look at what's going on with Cuba and the people who say that they want to pursue capitalism, it's young people. It's young people who've never experienced capitalism. They don't know how bad capitalism is. They've only experienced socialism, and they think they're going to get it both ways. There's things they're taking for granted about socialism that they assume they will get everywhere. They assume under capitalism they'll be able to go to the doctor because they can't imagine a world where you can't go to the doctor. They've never lived in that world. They don't know what that world's like. They think they're going to get it both ways. So this article, lab.org.uk, Being Young in Cuba. Navigating the world as a young person anywhere is not simple. In Cuba, it's particularly arduous. I spoke to several young 20-something Cubans attempting to carve out livelihoods on an island struck by persistent imperialism. Cuba has the largest percentage of people over 60 in Latin America because their life expectancy is so long, right? Young people are more likely to immigrate to the United States in pursuit of capitalism, for example, if they're going to do it at all. And so this is an article about this, about how young people are the ones that are like, maybe capitalism. Maybe capitalism is the way to do this. They're saying, these things aren't perfect about our system. Maybe capitalism would be better, right? And this is really what they're talking about. They're talking about the shift in permitting private enterprises since 2018, and it's made young Cubans more entrepreneurial, made them want to be more like capitalists. So this is what's going on here. So we're getting to a restless population. The bulk of young people still on the island wanting to leave, those are the people amongst whom an uneasy atmosphere of impermanence is being cultivated. Now, again, it's not most people on the island, young people who want to leave, but we're talking about the people who do, the people who have the capitalist ambitions. It does sound strange, you're right. Javier and Mirabella explained how destabilizing it can be to not have a circle of friends. They tell me the people they hang out with are not their close friends, just a group of half friends. Today, the most ardent defenders of the revolution, and therefore the most willing to remain in Cuba, are to be found among the older generation. So this is exactly what we saw with the Gorbachev generation in Russia. Some lived through the Batista dictatorship. They witnessed and experienced a tangible transformation from 1959 onward that they want to preserve. Young people born in the 90s and after, though, have almost exclusively associated the Cuban Revolution with shortages and difficulty, with no evidence of how the socialist revolution has benefited them. Right? And that's really what we want to hammer home. Young people don't know how bad capitalism was on the island. They don't know. So all they see is what they don't have because of the blockade. And they associate that with socialism because the media they consume from outside of Cuba is telling them that capitalism is shiny and perfect and glitzy and everybody's rich. Right? That's exactly what we're looking at. Now, what will happen if Cuba were to go capitalist, which I don't think they will, which I really don't think they will. But what would happen? Well, we can see what happened to the USSR. Well, 63% of people regretted the dissolution of the USSR that were polled here. Right? And this is just in Russia. So we'll get to the other regions as well. Yes, hi. We have a Twitch account. It's new. 84% of people over the age of 55 regret it. That's 84% of people old enough to remember both ways. Young people, 54% don't regret it because that's all they know. All they know is capitalism. And this is how it goes, right? All they know is capitalism. They don't know how good socialism was. And capitalism has a hell of a marketing campaign behind it. So capitalism will always win when it comes to a marketing campaign. But older people who lived through both, they regret it. They regret the dissolution because they know that things were better under socialism. We've normalized capitalism so much, right? You think it's normal. You think capitalism is normal. And you think capitalism is great. And we tell you over and over again, capitalism is the best system on earth. It's the best system on earth. It's the best system on earth. So the only way you know it's not is if you lived through capitalism and then made the switch to socialism. And those are the people who are like, I'm never going back. Fuck that. I'm not going back to capitalism. That was horrible. And then the people who ultimately made the switch back again to capitalism are like, yeah, this is way worse. This is way, way, way worse. So we see younger people tend to like capitalism more because they're influenced a lot by the media. And because they have all these preconceptions. They don't know. They don't understand what the reality of socialism could be. Right? And that's just Russia. So now let's look at the places that aren't Russia, right? The remainder of the USSR. What are they doing? This is one of my favorite Pew surveys from 2009, right? So approval of the change to democracy. Let's get into the age. I like the age one. Okay, age gap. This is what we're talking about here with the age gap. How many people in all these other countries approved of the switch to a multi-party system? Right? Let's look at 65 and up, because in 2009, when these people were polled, they were old enough to have spent 20 years in communism and 20 years in capitalism as adults. All right? This is what's important. In Russia, only 27% of people who had experienced both as adults said that the switch to a multi-party system was better. In Bulgaria, only 37%. In Czech Republic and Poland and Slovakia and East Germany, they preferred it. Those are the exceptions. Ukraine, no, 20%. Hungary, no, 45%. Lithuania, no, 43%. Most people old enough to experience both did not prefer what capitalism had to offer. Now look at the market economy. Bulgaria, 32%. Slovakia, 46%. Ukraine, 20%. Hungary, 36%. Lithuania, 41%. The only people here who approved of the switch to a market economy over, like, the majority were Poland, Czech Republic, and East Germany again. Right? Glitchy? Is it glitchy? Is it working? The point is, yes, here a socialist doc says, experience decreases the effectiveness of capitalist propaganda. Experience with both. Experience with both. When you've had experience with both, you can compare it and you're like, oh, I get it. But when you look at people who don't have the experience with both, they're going to choose capitalism. Because they're going to think that was better. Because all the marketing tells them it's better. Right? They don't know. The counter argument you hear is, oh, it's just nostalgia for their youth. It has nothing to do with the system. And, that is a claim that people like to make a lot. But when you look at older people today in the United States, older people today in the United States who've only experienced capitalism, they're going to tell you what, like the 1950s was better, the 1960s was better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we have documentation that shows materially that their quality of life has decreased. And that's how we know. I say that as an American because I'm an American. So it's common sense to us. We know things are worse in the United States today than they were in the 1950s, 1960s, whatever. For the average white person. Economically here. And these are the people who tend to be more conservative and tend to be more in favor of capitalism. But we have documented evidence that things are getting harder. We see the real value of your minimum wage going down, right? The same applies to these places. We have documented evidence of their quality of life getting worse to back up their anecdotal claims. So when somebody tells you that was better, you have that's an anecdote, that's anecdotal evidence, but you have concrete data as well showing things, home ownership rates, access to medicine, access to food, just life expectancy, literacy rates, things like this. We have access to this. We know that to back up the anecdotal claims of the older generation in the USSR who says that capitalism was way worse, we also know that when they switched from communism to capitalism, it was the largest single loss of life expectancy event on the planet. We know that substance abuse shot way up, that people were dying deaths of despair. We know that it was horrible. So we have both to balance it out. And I think that's important, right? It's not just nostalgia. You could say it's just nostalgia, sure. But just like the nostalgia here in the United States, when people are like, why did it seem like the 1950s were better for white Americans? You're like, well, because you were making more money. Because minimum wage went further. Because you could afford to buy a house, right? Now you look at your kids and you're like, why can't my kids afford to buy a house? Why are my kids still living with me? And it's like, well, because the real value of their wages has gone down. Because housing's been so aggressively commodified, they have to live with you. And we have data to back that up. And they have data the same way in the USSR. Marxist Gamer Zero, how come things are still going so badly here, but Americans have Stockholm Syndrome with capitalism and they get trigger happy if you dare to blame capitalism. Because of propaganda. Because of propaganda and ignorance. We're a very ignorant, heavily propagandized population. And that's why it's important for us to defend actually existing socialism. That's why it's important when people are like, well, this failed here, to go, what's your metric for failure? Because it didn't. It didn't fail. The rich people are just telling you it failed because it didn't work for them. But it worked for everybody else. Right? And that's why it's important. That's why we defend actually existing socialism, right? Yeah, why could my children not buy what I did with 1/4 of the buying power? We'll never know. We have the evidence. It's not just anecdote. So, I've got my notes here. Young people think their issues with sanctions are issues with socialism, right? They don't see it. They're like, well, maybe if we just stop being committed to socialism, the USA will lift the sanctions, or, the embargo, the blockade will be over, and then we'll get to live this really, really good life. Maybe it'll be better. They don't get it. So what can we tell people? Oh, hi, readers. Hello. Hello. Welcome. Welcome here. We are talking about Cuba and sanctions. So, can we imagine maybe what Cuba would be like if they made that transition? What would it be like? What would the situations in Cuba be most similar to? Now, we know that they were historically a neo-colony of the United States. So they would probably be returned to neo-colony status. We have no reason to believe otherwise. Who could we compare them to? Right? East Germany, I don't know. East Germany, they were not big fans. I'd be interested in learning more about East Germany personally. That's a hole in my knowledge gap. That's something I would have to research more. Oh, yay! Liesl Sardi, yay! Thank you so much. Thanks for sending everybody here. I'm so happy to have you guys. A second Russian oil tanker? Did a second Russian oil tanker arrive today? And Poland and Czech Republic. Those three are places where it's less popular. That's cool. That's very exciting. I'm so excited. So I think that a place we could compare it to would be something like Liberia. Liberia is also a small neo-colony of the United States today. So let's take a look at... Oh, just preparing for when it happens. Okay, that's good. Get the practice in. So Liberia, this is a place that's a small neo-colony of the United States that many people think functions very, very similarly. So to me, if Cuba makes the switch and goes fully capitalist, what can we expect from them? They're probably going to be a lot like Liberia. They have a relative size. They have a relative history of a relationship with the United States. It'll probably be like contemporary, Liberia today. That would be my guess. So let's just, as a comparative analysis, look at it. We know Liberia experiences a lot of poverty, right? And we know Cuba experiences a lot of poverty. Cuba's impoverished, certainly. But we know what Cuba's able to accomplish with their poverty. They're able to accomplish, massive amounts of healthcare for their citizens, a wildly high life expectancy rate, an education system that many experts have said is probably better than the United States, a good quality of life, no homelessness, political stability. They're able to accomplish all of this while experiencing massive poverty. So Liberia is a similarly impoverished place, but what are they able to really approach, or what are they able to really achieve, rather, to this? They're dealing with a lot of issues, dimensions of poverty. They have a lot of issues. Gender disparity. Cuba, we know, has the second highest rates of women in government anywhere in the world. Women are very, very well respected in Cuba. They don't have that in Liberia. They have this very chauvinistic, regressive kind of approach that's inspired by, influenced by, heavily dictated by their relationship to the United States as a neo-colony. And that's what Cuba would return to, right? It's not Liberia's fault. It's not their fault, but they've existed as a neo-colony of Cuba, or like Cuba, and that is They didn't have that socialist revolution that we're currently now seeing the results of, saving them from that. So this is, I think, a good comparison. They have uneven trends in food security. So let's kind of look at more of this. Life expectancy in Liberia is just 62 years old compared to Cuba's 80. So we could probably expect to see a drop in Cuba's life expectancy if they made that shift. Because so much of what Cuba's able to do is with preventative medicine. Well, if they are not able to have their socialist medical project, they're not doing preventative medicine anymore. They're not going to have the neighborhood doctors you can go visit night or day and they'll open the door for you. They're not going to have the neighborhood doctors coming out into your community to do home visits every single day that they're there. They're not going to be meeting with pregnant women every single day. They're not going to have maternal homes where people who are in high-risk pregnancies can go and live to make sure that their babies are born safely. They're not going to have free hospitals. They're not going to have any of that. Yeah, so that's going to be something that's probably going to be affected. Similarly, Liberia doesn't have gay rights. They criminalize same-sex activity. And we know that's common in lots of places. We know the way that you deal with that is to provide people with economic and political stability. Economic and political stability is the precursor to advancing LGBTQ rights. Cuba has been able to establish, despite its poverty, relative economic and political stability so that they were able to dedicate resources towards advancing gay rights, towards a massive queer education campaign in 2019 when they redid their constitution. Liberia hasn't had extra resources to dedicate to that. They don't have enough political and economic stability. Both of these are impoverished countries that have had neocolonial status under the United States. But Liberia is not politically and economically stable enough to be able to take that on. Cuba has been. That's something that Cuba probably wouldn't have. They probably wouldn't have their constitutionally enshrined gay rights anymore. Another thing we would see make the shift if Cuba were to go capitalist again. Here we go in Liberia. There's massive amounts of homelessness. This is a major issue. They also had a civil war, right? Political instability. Political instability of switching to capitalism is similarly unstable. They've had a lot of people dealing with severe malnutrition. Children between 6 to 59 months, 30% of them dealing with severe malnutrition. What do we see in Cuba? If you're malnourished, they will literally come bring you food. They will give you free food. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to do that if we make them switch to capitalism. Look at this. Here in Liberia, the country faces high levels of child marriage. 42% of girls married before the age of 18. Think about girls in Cuba. Think about that. Think about Cuba has the second highest rates of women in government. In Liberia, they have high rates of child marriage for girls, for teenage girls. This is what happens when you switch to capitalism, right? Women become commodified objects, right? Ingalls talks about this. We know this. We know how women are treated under capitalism. So they'd lose that. They'd lose all their advancements in women's rights, I'm willing to bet. What else goes on in Liberia? Well, they have so many homeless children that the homeless children are sleeping in cemeteries. Cuba doesn't have homelessness like that. Think about the care. Think about the children, the way children are treated in Cuba. They have the children's code. They have the family code. The children have their own government. They are able to advocate for themselves. A switch to capitalism is going to undo that whole structure. Now, all of a sudden, children are powerless in society again. Children are vulnerable and a vulnerable exploited class. Right? And again, that's with poverty. That's what Cuba's been able to do with poverty just because of their socialist system. And next thing you know, you're going to have homeless children, right? Without dignity, without respect, without care, not being prioritized. And again, that's not to blame the people of Liberia. That's what capitalism does. These are systemic effects of capitalism. It's Liberia. It could just as easily be any other country in the world. I just chose one of a similar size with a similar kind of history of neocolonization. Meanwhile, also in Liberia, just 11% of people go to college in Liberia, okay? Just 11%. Think about Cuba's amazing free public healthcare system, their college system. Think about how cool their college system is. Well, 43% of people in Cuba go to college. So you're going to lose all that. They're going to lose their education. They're going to lose everything. Everything that they've worked for their socialist system. Things are not going to get better off for the people of Cuba under capitalism. There's no way. And the majority of people know that, thank God. Thank God 90% of Cubans know that. But for the 10% who are like, maybe, what they're imagining is not the reality of what capitalism will bring to their doorstep. And it's very sad to see them go, maybe it'll be like this, and to know it won't be like that. It won't be like what you see on TV. It won't be like Cardi B. They love Cardi B. I don't know. It's not going to be like that, right? It's gonna be children losing their homes, child brides, massive illiteracy. Look what happened to Libya. Libya didn't even have an explicitly Marxist project, right? They were Marxist-Leninists. They were third way. They were just doing some socialist land reform. Look what happened to Libya. That was a stable place, a stable country. And we turned it to rubble, and now they have open-air slave markets. That's what will happen if capitalism comes to Cuba. Yeah, I don't know why Cardi B specifically. A lot of people are talking about Cardi B, though. I don't know. Yeah, it was Cardi B specifically, though. And that's the devastation and destruction that capitalism brings. That's what is being talked about in Parenti's book, where he's like, they don't know. They don't remember what life was like for them under capitalism. And Cuba is the global south. They're not going to get the American, European brand of capitalism. They are going to get the global south brand of capitalism. Where you are living in slums, if you have a slum to live in at all, and your entire existence is there to serve at the behest of the United States and European capitalist oligarchy to make them richer. You are going to get the worst brand of capitalism. The profits of capitalism aren't for you, babe. Right? They're for Donald Trump. They're for rich guys. They're for the Epstein class. You are there to be exploited by them. And it's hard to explain to somebody who doesn't have enough familiarity with the day-to-day dealings of capitalism. Now again, luckily, most Cubans are extremely educated. Their education system is so good. You talk to the average Cuban, they know about capitalism, about communism, about fascism. They know a lot about the world. They know a lot about your politics in your country, in your state where you live. They know more than the average American probably does walking around there. But again, for those 10% of people who are taken in by it, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to look in the eyes and go, oh, that's what you think's going to happen. That's not what's going to happen. It's not going to be like that for you. And how do you explain that to them? So, that's the goal of sanctions, though. The goal of sanctions is to make you struggle so much that you think anything would be better than this, even capitalism, right? All right. So that is it for today's stream. Do you guys have any questions before we go, before I send you all to Larry? Liberia has about 0.5 to 1 the population of Cuba. Good. I tried to choose something off the top of my head. You're so Cuba pilled? I'm Cuba pilled too, baby. I'm Cuba pilled too, baby. Oh, yeah. Did you see the person in my comment section who cited Google Gemini as a source, then was told they needed a real source, they cited Wikipedia, and then when told they needed a better source, they cited Radio Free Asia? Yeah. We're up against a lot. We're up against a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there in the world. But I think it's always important that we share this info readily. We stand firm and resolute. We correct misinformation when we see it. Sanctions is like being thirsty enough to be willing to drink poison. Marxist Gamer Zero. Excellent analogy. Yes, yes, yes. That is what 10% of the people in Cuba are experiencing. We need to end the sanctions. We need to end the blockade. Mandatory Larry raid definitely coming. Save the VOD. Yep, they are. And it's all going to be up on the VOD and my YouTube. I have a YouTube where I export all of this content. It is there. It's Madeline Pendleton there as well. Why aren't sanctions considered a war crime? It's just business as usual. It's just considered a part of doing business. And there are some researchers working to kind of make this no longer a practice because they kill 500,000 people a year, but they're not getting traction. Sanction the capitalists. What do we have here? We got a link really fast. Priority medication supplied to hospitals, lacking medicines for the population of Santiago province. Oh, cute. Cool. What is this? What am I looking at? It's nice. It's nice. Cool. This is so cool. Brazilian. I love it. Oh, landless workers movement of Brazil. Oh, it's the landless. Yes, okay, I scrolled too fast. This is so cool. This is so cool. I love it. I love the international solidarity stuff. It's amazing. It's so great. So cool. All right. We are rating Larry. We're rating Larry. Yeah, we need to figure out how to talk to liberals without them immediately getting offensive. I'm working on it all the time. The thing is, they switch up their game. When I first started TikTok, I figured it out because they all wanted to be good people. Because it was like, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. They're like, yes, I will get educated. Yes, I will. Now, they're like, fuck you. I love Ozempic. Donald Trump bad. And that's it. That's all they've got. They have no thoughts beyond that. And you're like, do you want to read a book? And they're like, I will kill you. That's ableist. I hate you. It's wild. So we got to figure out the new technique. And I'm telling you, my new technique is just to say less and act like they should already know. You know? So instead, when people are like, you support North Korea, instead of being like, yes, here's why, here's how you be it. I'm just like, yeah, girl, what? Catch up. We don't have time for this. Ugh. And I think that's working better. Fuck y'all. I love Ozempic. We're rating Larry. That's the evil Madeline. That's evil Madeline. Okay, and then yes, people who got elected to be the new mods. I'm going to try to remember to do that today. It's on my to-do list. Girl, the blockade. Girl. See? I think it works. It's working. Okay, love you all. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be finishing up Theory Thursday. Castro on Marxism-Leninism. Okay, bye. Get ready, though. Get ready for the raid. And going out.